I'm on the edge. I've been here forever, an eternity compressed into a singular moment, an endless sunset where light never vanishes beyond the horizon. Insanity has consumed me, but the rails hold me and prevent my fall into the bay. I blink, and this history unfolds before my eyes. I see how it ends, and the rail gives way. Now I am free. Just before I fall, an old man calls to me. I turn my head and maintain my balance. If he has lasted here for so long, then maybe I can as well. He is alone on a bench and pats the space next to him. I sit. He asks for my story, but I would rather learn his. How have I not seen him before? I tell him there is not much to me. I am a wanderer, just passing through. I got mesmerized by the sunset and its beauty, but when I looked out across the bay, I saw the past, but the future is what scared me most. Just passing through. Good, he says. He continues to tell me that he has grown old, looking into the sunset, looking into the abyss, but warns me not to do as he did. If you gaze long into the abyss looks back at you. I'm confused, but don't interrupt. His name is Nippon, and he has been here for over 30,000 years, but stopped counting long ago. I ask what he has seen, what he has learned. There are devils in paradise, he says, but we have no choice but to give them refuge. We stopped making angels, and like air, the devils have filled the vacuum. They have come to my paradise, but don't speak my language, don't cherish my customs, and have brought ruin to my cities. We can barely communicate with them, yet they grow and spread like a plague. This is why the sun sets. He turns and points, asking me to read the sign. I shrug. I see the sign, but I can't read the lines. You see, he says, you don't even know where you are, the significance of this place. I appreciate the beauty nonetheless. What is beauty without meaning, he says, without history? You are too naive to understand, and I am done trying to teach your kind, to only then cast you out in frustration. I now see it was Nippon who made the railing. If I am a devil, then why did you save me, and not cast me out into the bay like the rest? Because you came here, and on your own fruition, lingered on the edge. You know the sun is setting, while the rest of your kin see a sunrise. Here on the bay they are indistinguishable, but you know the difference. I have seen things you wouldn't believe. Attack ships off the shore of Osaka. I watched cannons glitter in the dark near Odawara. All those moments will be lost, like tears in rain. It's humid in Japan, and it smells like fish. I'm your host, Negative Nick, and this is the No Good News Podcast. So let me start by saying this. There are so few children in Japan. You know, over here in the States, I hear the stories and I see the statistics about how it's a dying country. I think their birth rate is like 1.3 or something like that. It might even be lower. But I see the stats, and then I go to Japan and I say, well, what does that look like? What does it look like in practice when a country is running out of kids? Because in India, it was the opposite. In India, there's children everywhere, robbing you, stealing, dancing in the streets naked. But what's it look like in Japan, a country that supposedly has no kids? Well, what it looks like is you're in Tokyo for 6 days and you see 4 kids the whole time you're there. That's what it looks like. Tokyo is a city with about 40 million people. It's actually the most populated city on Earth. So you have 40 million people in the city. But the population of Japan, the whole country, is 120 million. So 1/3 of Japanese people live in Tokyo. Insane. Like, for context, we've got like 350 million Americans, and our most populated city is either like LA or New York City. Both hover around about 15 million. So like so Japan is 1/3 of their country is in one city. But in the United States, we're not even cracking like 1% of our people being in one city. So you're surrounded by people, but and it can get overwhelming at times. But the Japanese, they don't have body odor. The way their genetics, it's I'm being serious. It's like a genetic thing they got. It's East Asians. So the Japanese, the Koreans, there's a few of those East Asian peoples that don't sweat. So, well, no, excuse me, they sweat, but they don't have body odor, and it's great because when you're on a train with a million of them, you're the only guy that smells, right? So they don't want me there, but I love being around them. So being surrounded by the people is okay, but there's no kids. Now, I did Tokyo, and I also explored the northern part of Japan, and that is called Hokkaido. Japan has 4 main islands. The largest island is called Honshu. Honshu has Tokyo, Osaka, Kyoto, Hiroshima. All of those are on Honshu. Hokkaido is the second largest island, and it's far in the north. And most people haven't even heard of any city up there, but the most populated and common city up there is Sapporo, which is also a type of beer. That's where they make Sapporo beer. So, but if you haven't heard of Sapporo, you probably haven't heard of anything up there in Hokkaido. But in Hokkaido, it is one of the least populated parts of Japan, and it's under snow for more than half of the year. It actually touches Russia, which a lot of people don't know. So that's pretty interesting. Yeah. There's a series of there's an island chain. There's a chain of small islands that I'm forgetting the name of. Producer, maybe you could look up the name of the island chain that connects Russia to Japan. They actually have a contested border because they never agreed to the new lines when World War II ended. Because the Soviets fought with us, and we obviously nuked the Japanese. There we go. They're called the Kuril Islands, Kuril. Thank you, producer. So the Kuril Islands are a series of small islands that connect Japan to Russia. And Hokkaido is at the bottom of the Kuril Islands. I say this for a few reasons. One is that there's actually a lot of Russians in Hokkaido, whether they be tourists or citizens. Lots of Russians walking around, and you could tell they're Russian because they're tall and they're white. So they're usually blonde. Like a large percentage of them are blonde, but they weren't Asian Russians because Russia is such a big country. The westernmost part of Russia, where like Moscow is, for example, they look European. They look like Polish people, but the eastern part, like Siberia, they look Chinese. They're Asian. But I saw a lot of Western white Russians in Hokkaido. And I actually went to the consulate, the Russian consulate in Hokkaido, which is pretty cool. I just stumbled upon it by accident. It was really cool. So Japan was a great country, and that introduction that we just did was basically the story of Japan. And in Japan, in Japanese, they call their country Nippon. That's the name of their country. So that introduction was really about me having an internal dialogue with Japan and how the sun is setting on Japan because there's no children. So the country's dying out. And because the country's dying, Japan is forced to import. They're forced to bring people in. They're forced to have immigrants. They need immigration because the country is unsustainable without it. And historically, Japan was a country that despised immigrants and didn't let them in. Japan didn't even do trade with the outside world until Europe and I believe maybe the United States basically invaded the country and forced them to do trade. So they were so against trade that they were willing to fight and die rather than just trade with other people, which is insane. So, but now they have been reduced to, they need immigrants. So this actually happened. This was actually announced while I was in Japan. Japan is going to be bringing in 500,000 Indians to address labor shortages in the country. 500,000. Wow. And only 50,000, according to the government, 50,000, so 1 out of 10 of these, will be, quote, skilled laborers. So by the government's own admission, 90% of these immigrants are going to be uneducated, unskilled Indian laborers that they're bringing in as immigrants.
Wow.
And the reason for that is because they don't have people. So the country's falling apart. And when you walk around, you notice some immigrants, and this might just be anecdotal or my mind playing tricks on me, but I noticed more immigrants this time than when I was there just 1 year ago. This was my second time in Japan. I went last year in the month of May, and yeah, that's right, May of 2024 is the last time I went. So it was really a dialogue about the devils in paradise because the immigrants are destroying Japan. They don't understand the customs. They don't understand the language. Regular people, like Japanese people, can't understand them, can't talk to them. And a lot of these immigrants, especially the Indians, they don't even take any interest in learning Japanese. So you're walking around and you hear Hindi or all these other Indian languages. So it's basically culture death to the country of Japan. Like within 20 years, Japan won't even look the same. It's one of those things where it's like, I love the country now, but I think I'm probably going to go to Japan 1 or 2 more times, but it's going to be like in the near future. Because like by the time I'm retired, I think the country will be unrecognizable. That's what I'm trying to say. In the same way that England and France are already unrecognizable. But that happened in my youth, so I never got to see that. It's already too late for me to enjoy what Europe used to be. But Japan, the sun is setting. But the immigrants that are coming in, they see it as they get to dominate and take over a new place that is in pristine condition and that they get to live better than wherever they were. So the people coming into Japan that aren't assimilating, they see it as a sunrise, not as a sunset. And I went to this bay. It was my first real night in Japan because we landed at night. Like we landed basically at like 5 or 6 p.m. and then we spent the rest of that evening like in the airport. And then the next night, but my first real night in Japan, I was in the city of Hakodate, Hakodate. It's in Hokkaido. And they've got this bay. The unique geography of the city is such that when the sun sets and rises, it is basically it looks like it's the same place because it's over the ocean. And the way the land is designed, the city is pointing due south. The city points due south. But like if you have no sense of direction, a sunset and a sunrise will look the same because there's no land references. Both things happen over the ocean. And like obviously that's indistinguishable. So like in that spot in particular, you kind of get the same feeling. Like you get the same view. Like for example, on the east coast of the United States, our sun rises over the ocean, but our sun sets over the Appalachian Mountains. But what I'm trying to say is in Hakodate, it rises and sets over the water. So it kind of looks the same no matter what. So, and that was an incredible moment. It was me and my 2 buddies, and I know you're both listening. We were there for a while. We had a great time. So yeah, but I want to talk a little bit more about Japan and also just about the people, about devils in paradise. So I'm going to do a little bit of both here. I want to talk more about the children of Japan, and I want to start with something which is that the children of Japan love and adore me. Whenever I do see a child, they come over, and this was true the first time I went as well. They come over, they pull on my pant leg, they stare. These Japanese kids love me. They stare, they look, they point, they smile. If the kids are a little bit older, now we're talking like 7 to 12 range, they'll want to come over and shake your hand. Because in Japan, they teach kids in school that when you meet an American, you shake their hand. First time I went to Japan with a different group of friends, they're also listening right now. We can attest that lines of children, like 20 children lined up, and they all wanted to shake my hand. It happened to me and my friend on different occasions. So it's like a common practice. And kids come over in their school uniforms and they just want to shake the hand of an American. It's a pretty cool thing. And like a few of them want like a selfie, which is kind of cool. But you see, the thing is, a lot of Americans go to Japan. So maybe it's just like the ones that go don't look like me. I don't really know what's going on. But And what's also funny about the Japanese school children is they're also short. So as I look down on them from above, they all look the same. They all have the same haircut. They wear the same school uniform. So I was in Tokyo Station and I'm walking around and there's thousands, I'm not exact, there's thousands of ants walking around and they all look the same. They're all like 3 feet tall, something like that. They're young kids, boys and girls, but their haircuts are basically identical and they all wear the same uniform. It's very jarring. It's weird. Like it's like walking through a ball pit. Like they're all waist high, and like there's really no way to distinguish them. And if you drop something, it just gets lost. You know, that's how it felt walking through Tokyo Station with all the children. So, but the kids are great. Just now in Japan, it was humid. Maron, it was humid. It was in Tokyo. It was 95 degrees Fahrenheit. And at night, the lowest it got, 2 a.m., dead of the night, was 88 Fahrenheit. Dead of the night. Humidity, this is no joke, 75, 80, 85% humidity, depending on the day. So it's hot and you're humid. You're sweating. You go outside for 20 minutes, you're sweating. Because Japan, and a lot of people don't know this, but Japan is a jungle. It's a jungle biome. So whenever they build cities, they're just cutting down rainforest. Like Mount Fuji's in like the middle of a jungle. There's monkeys, like India. It's actually a very similar biome climate, I would say, to India. It felt very, very similar. The first time I went to Japan, it was hot, but not this hot. This was crazy. This was unreal. I'm actually convinced that when I go to Egypt in January, it's not even going to be this hot as it was in Japan. It was surreal. So on most days from about 11 a.m. to 4 p.m., I would just sequester myself in the hotel to rest. I've already done a lot of the stuff. My two friends, God bless them, they went out, they dealt with the humidity. But I don't want to, I don't want to be I don't want to be annoying, and I want them to have a good time, and I've already done it before. So I'll just go rest. I need to rest. And that was good because at night I had energy. So then I could go and I could roam the city deep into the night. That was a loud ring I just heard in my ear. Hope probably got picked up on the audio. Maybe not. That's great. Anyways, it was a very good experience. I was sitting on the train in Tokyo. I only saw 4 kids that I can remember the entire time that I was in Tokyo. And one of those times I'm alone. I'm sitting on the train. I'm on the JR lines. I'm on the Japanese rail metro train, the subway. I get on the train, there's plenty of seats. The train's basically empty, which was super lucky for me. And a mother with her daughter, they get on the train. I guess the girl's 5 or 6 years old. There's plenty of open seats. The mother sits across from me. The daughter opts. The daughter chooses on her own to sit next to me instead of her mother. So I've got the daughter to my left and the mother directly across from me. And obviously they don't speak English. That's fair. I don't expect them to. And I don't speak Japanese. So I just smile, and that's all. The daughter, this 5-year-old, is staring at me. Will not stop looking. But what's interesting is when I look back at her, she looks away. But I see her in my periphery. And for the whole 10 minutes I'm on that train, because they got on after me, and then I got off before them. But the entire time I'm on the train, she's staring at me. But whenever I look at her, she looks away, because it's very common. They're very shy, the Japanese people. It's very weird. It's like the whole country, all of them are shy. It's very strange. But it's their culture. It's like the way things are over there. And then when I get off the train, I turn back and I wave back, and the little girl smiles and she waves at me. I'm telling you, these kids love me, dude. First time I went, we were at a restaurant sitting on the floor, sitting on bamboo mats. First time I went to Japan. And to my right, we were at dinner. To my right, there's 2 moms, and each mom has a young child, a young boy and a young girl. Kids are maybe 3 years old. They're short. The moms are trying to talk, but the babies want attention. My friends, I was just, the kids wanted to play. So the 2 kids come over, and I'm playing with the kids while we're eating dinner. I'll never forget that. It was a great night. And the moms were like, please, take them, Like they wanted some alone time. So the children of Japan are excellent. When you go north into Hokkaido, Sapporo in particular, there's a lot of kids. Now, I say that there's a lot because it's like the ratio. Like for every child in Sapporo, there might be 7 adults. Whereas in Tokyo, it's like for every child, it felt like there was 99 adults, is what I'm trying to say. So proportionally, as I walk around, there's more children in Sapporo. And they cart them around in laundry baskets with wheels. So you get a laundry basket like we'd see at a hotel. Like, like a hotel girl who's cleaning your room. They've got like a cart and they throw their dirty towels in, and then they bring it down. The one like a laundry cart. They throw the children into these carts and they wheel them around. And the little kids hang over the side and they look out. It's super cute. And they all wear like blue hats. The Japanese children in preschool, in elementary school and preschool, their uniforms are yellow, red, blue, green, like all like very bright colors. And it's to prevent them from being run over in the street whenever they cross the street. Because there's a lot of walking, but there's also a lot of cars. But I would see the teachers putting these, picking up the children, throwing them in the laundry bin, and then they would push them across the street or whatever. It was really cute to see. Well, I mean, they're ragdolling them in, these kids, they're nimble. They're young boys, So, and they love it, they're falling all over each other, but they're having fun. Anyways, it was nice to see, I actually coined a term for them with my friends. I started calling them the children of the North. That's what I started calling them because there were so many of them, and it was nice to see that the country had a future, because everywhere else I went, and the first time I went to Japan, I never went to the North. I was in the center, Tokyo down to Kyoto and to Osaka, like the central. That's where most people go, like the central band, and there's no kids. So it was nice to see that somewhere in this country people are having kids, and the children of the North, they're gonna have to carry the torch, and they're gonna have to carry Japan into the next century, and they're gonna have to deal with the problems that come from a rising population and a lack of a tax base and things like that. But it was incredible. Japan was like sleepwalking into just in these incredible adventures. One thing leads to another. You trip, you fall, boom, you land somewhere awesome. You see something cool. It was really nice. Like in India, in order to see cool things, you had to be intentional. You had to plan it out. Like, we want to see this cool thing. Let's do some research the night before, and tomorrow we'll go there. And I built a very nice itinerary, a very, very nice itinerary. But I left gaps in it on purpose because I remembered that the first time I went to Japan, it's almost like a feeling of whimsy. You just you trip and you fall and you find something great, But, with the itinerary, traveling is work. I feel like there's vacation and there's travel. Vacation is all-inclusive. Maybe you're on a cruise. You're in the same hotel for the entirety of your stay. You're sleeping in. You're going to bed late, but you're sleeping in. You're relaxed. Maybe you're in the pool. You're in the water, right? That's a vacation. Then there's travel. Travel, you're planning things out. We were going to bed at 1 a.m. and waking up at 5 a.m., 4:30 a.m., multiple days in a row. You're sleeping on the train. You're getting to work. You're walking 10 miles in the heat. You're trying to navigate. And we had a great time. It was an incredible trip. But it's work. And some people, their mind isn't built for that. Everybody gets worn down after 17 days in that environment. But some people just aren't built for it. They can't do it at all. Their mind, they don't have the fortitude, the inner strength, to explore and immerse themselves in a culture. It's hard to basically go 15 days without talking to anyone in English, except for the 2 guys you're with. That's hard for some people. It's hard for me. By the end, when you find someone, by the end of the trip, I would say, oh my God, that's a white person. I would go over just to talk to him and speak English, just to get some reps in, to practice. Because I felt like I was losing my edge by some point in the trip because you're basically using sign language, and that's fine. That's how it is. I'm not saying I expect them to know English, but what I'm saying is it takes a certain level of mental fitness and fortitude. It's not for the faint of heart is what I'm trying to say. But if you have that fortitude, you can really have some incredible experiences. And that's what, while I'm still young, I'm mentally old, but while I'm physically young, I want to travel like that. When I'm older is when I'll go sit on a beach somewhere, But while I'm young and while I can walk 10 miles a day, multiple days in a row, that's the kind of traveling I want to do. I would fair to say that 70% of Americans 35 years or older couldn't have even survived this trip. They might even have a heart attack going up the stairs. Well, because we've got these apps now that track your fitness and whatnot. 60 flights of stairs per day. Like, you're getting hit, man. You're getting hit. Your heart, they're putting you to work. I would say the best part of any vacation is the first time you take a shit. That's what I would say. Because for me personally, when I'm traveling, I get constipated. It's because my body is in a new environment and I can't use the bathroom. Are you like this?
Mm-mm.
No? No matter where you are, just pop a squat.
Slide, yeah.
Like an Indian. There you go.
Okay.
So, no matter where you are, you could just make it happen, and God bless. But my body doesn't work that way. So after 24 hours, I'm feeling bloated. It's becoming a problem. But when I travel to a new environment, my body can't use the bathroom. That's why whenever I go somewhere for the first time, anywhere, it might be your apartment, it might be another country, it might be a new city, anything. The first time I use the bathroom, I don't even sit on the toilet. I just I let my body get used to the space. I open the cabinets, I set myself up, I learn how the shower works, I might just stand and, see how the smell is, see how good the cleaning people did. You check out the corners. I'm being 100% serious right now because my body has to acclimate to the environment. If I just walk into the bathroom and sit down, nothing's going to happen. No matter how bad I have, nothing's going to happen. If you put some curry in me, that's a different story. But assuming I'm at baseline, right, and I've had nothing to disturb my insides, I'm not going to be able to use the bathroom. I have to acclimate to the environment. And that's why I like to, every day when I'm on vacation with other people, in the morning, I use the bathroom first. But I'm considerate. I wake up insanely early, mentally ill-wise. I wake up early just so I can use the bathroom in peace and there's no rush because I have to acclimate. And then at night, I use it last so no one's waiting on me. So I'm first in and I'm last out, always, because my body needs to process. So that's definitely the best part. And I did really good here. I took some notes in my journal. Whenever I travel, I journal when I use the bathroom. And in Japan, the first time I went to Japan, I didn't take a shit for 3 days.
Damn.
3 days. You know what that does to the body? You feel like you're rotting from the inside. It's an incredible feeling. And I'm physically fit, it's like I'm walking 10 miles, right? But I just can't do it. Well, India was the second day, but it was explosive. That's different, right? But now, this time, I was able to use the bathroom the very first night.
Nice.
That's because I felt at home. I felt at home in Japan. I landed and I said, God damn, it's good to be back. That's how I felt when I got off that plane. And I walked over to the sign and said, welcome to Japan in the airport. And I said, I've been here before. I remember that sign from last year. And walking through Tokyo especially, because I've been there before, it was like water off a duck's ass. It was nothing. It was easy for me to navigate. I was totally in charge. My what do you call this? My international data plan, like my phone, like my cellular service, was super spotty. And I'm being completely serious. There'd be 8-hour periods where I'm in Tokyo and I have no cell service. Now my two friends had service, which was great, but mine was going in and out. But like I said earlier, I would kind of break off and do my own thing pretty often, just because of the heat. So I'd go home, I'm in the heat. Maybe I want a snack. I'd leave the hotel real quick to get food, whatever. But I also went on some nice adventures by myself. All I'm trying to say is I was able to navigate without cell service. Very proud of myself. You could get lost over there, I'm telling you. So yeah, those were just some cultural things. The children that I did see in the north, they're so talented. Their dexterity skills, are incredible. They're incredible. I'm not one of those people who is like only into Asians. In fact, that's the opposite of the truth. Like I'm not I'm in what I'm saying is I'm not like I don't have like an obsession with them. That's kind of creepy. But what I'm saying is I would like to have a Japanese wife just because I would have a Japanese child. Because these Japanese kids are great. You're on the train, they're silent. They don't make a sound. I think they change their own diapers, honestly. I mean, these kids are incredible. You're sitting at the restaurant. I'm sitting at a restaurant, and these kids are already cooking tonkatsu. They're like 2.5, 3 years old. They're behind the grill, making food. It's insane. They bring out ramen. So I'm eyeing this child. He's maybe two.
That sounds great.
I see this kid in the background. He's in a high chair. Okay, young child. I'm gonna ballpark it and say 1.5. Okay, they bring this kid a small bowl of ramen. I see the steam, in the distance. I see the steam coming out of the bowl. Okay, young child, high chair, left hand. Kid takes his left hand, lifts the bowl. Already, that's elite skills. I can't even do that. My hand would be burning. Lifts the hot bowl of ramen. Right hand. Chopsticks. There's no way this kid is older than 3. Impossible. Chopsticks in the right hand, holding the bowl with the left hand, is feeding himself with the chopsticks, pulling out pork out of this bowl, ramen, slurping ramen from the bowl.
Wow.
This dexterity is incredible.
Yeah.
I mean, I thought I was in a fantasy land. Like what I'm seeing here, it was incredible, and that's what I want. I want my kids to just feed themselves. If all kids had the skills that Japanese kids have, the world would be overpopulated because there would be no input cost to raising them. I'm convinced they put themselves to bed. Honestly, it's incredible. So it was. That was something I witnessed when I was in Japan, and the best way to say it is these children, they basically operate like independent adults. They've got their own thing going, and it's really something to see. If so, really, it's worth going to Japan just to observe the children, I would say. God, that sounds terrible as well. I gotta move on from this segment. There's too many landmines over here. I gotta move on. Oh my god, I gotta move on. All right. Well, I'll talk about my accommodation, I guess. So when I'm in Tokyo for a week, we stayed in a hostel. Okay, so we're in a hostel for just over. I think we were there for 6 nights, maybe 7 nights, maybe even 8 nights. We were there for a while. Half of our trip, we were in Tokyo, and we went to other cities, but we would always come home and sleep in Tokyo, because Tokyo is the hub, and if you're willing to sit on a bullet train for 3 hours, you can basically go anywhere, more or less. You could get to Kyoto in 2.5 hours on a bullet train, right? So we went to Kyoto for a day, but we were back in Tokyo by night. So we stayed there for just over a week, and this is the same hostel I stayed in the first time I went to Japan. Mm-hmm. And I did that on purpose because the first time I went to Japan, I was saying to myself, wow, this is a great location. $30 a night, cheap. $30 a night. But you're thinking slum conditions. No, it's good. Like, it gets the job done. It's 4 bunk beds, so 2 sets of bunk beds, right? 2 on the bottom, 2 on the top. Small room. The entire room was probably the size of your bed right here, maybe a little bit bigger.
This is like a full-size bed.
No, but I'm saying the entire room was this size.
Oh my gosh.
It's a small room. The entire room was like the size of I think the entire room was like the size of a king-size bed.
Okay.
Which, there's basically no walking space.
Yeah.
If you opened up a suitcase on the floor, there's no walking space. Mm. So you got to work together with your brothers, with your comrades. You got to make things work. But what I like about this joint is that you're between Ueno, Asakusa, and Ginza. You're right in the middle of all 3, and these are different parts of the city. I won't really get into that. You know what? Maybe I will. But you're between 3 very good parts of the city with a lot of tourist attractions. And you're basically 10 minutes from all 3 of them. 1 train stop, 2 train stops. It's perfect. In addition, The room has crisp AC. Remember, it was 95 degrees. We're melting in the jungle. We would crank that room to the lowest it could possibly go. It was Celsius, and I have no idea what that even means, so I don't even remember what number we were using. But we put that thing as low as it would go. It was so cold in the room and so hot in the hallway that by day 3 or 4, the door to the room, it was a thick wooden door, not these cheap ones in America, a thick wooden door covered in water because of the condensation, the temperature delta between the inside and the outside of the room. The door was drenched with water, and nothing makes you feel better than coming back from being hot outside and seeing that cold door. You're unlocking the door as fast as you can to get in there. And by the end of our stay, last 2 or 3 days, we actually had a puddle on the floor, a permanent puddle of water.
That's crazy.
Which we saw as a sign of honor, a sign that we were doing things right. You shared the bathroom, but it had 3 showers. It was clean. It was a good thing. There's a men's bathroom and a women's bathroom. The women's bathroom is downstairs, and only women can use it. The men's bathroom is upstairs, and women are technically allowed to use it as well. So it's a co-ed situation. But the reason it's co-ed is because the one laundry machine is in the co-ed room. Okay? So they don't tell you this directly, but really the women should be in their bathroom if they want to feel comfortable. You know what I'm trying to say to you? Well, I started realizing that people in this hostel are super, they're being loud in the bathroom. I'm trying to explain it to you. Like, it's 2 a.m. and you hear people, having a fucking kumbaya in the bathroom. And I'm trying to go to sleep over here. So I realized I had to do some shock therapy to get these people to stop coming into the bathroom when I was there. Because now I'm in the bathroom and people are getting in the way. There's only 2 sinks, but only one sink has a mirror. People are taking their time. Massive shit going on. It smells. I want people to have a little bit of respect and honor, but they're foreigners, so they don't have any of that. They're devils in paradise. So I realized that I have to take matters into my own hands. I've got to get extreme here. So I when they go low, you go lower, right? So by the, early in the trip, because already because I remember how it was the first time, but then when I came back, it was the same way. So already I'm walking, because the bathroom, there's a hallway. There's the bathroom, then there's a hallway to my room. I'm walking around in my underwear, shirtless, barefoot. Now, not looking at me isn't frightful, when I'm shirtless. But you gotta shock them. You gotta surprise people. You go to the bathroom, maybe you take a shit with the door open, that clear out the room. Maybe you start conversations in the bathroom. That people hate that. People hate when you talk to them in the bathroom. But I would do that, just so they leave. It gets them out, clears the space, So what I'm trying to say is, and I'm not even in there for that long, but, or another thing you do is you look at them. You just give them eye contact. If you give someone eye contact in the bathroom, they're either going to A, feel uncomfortable and leave. That's what we want. Or B, they're going to strike up a conversation, and that's a win-win, because now I get to learn about some guy from Canada or whatever, Sweden, whatever. So you gotta take matters into your own hands, because we were there for most of these people. They're there for 1 night, 2 nights. We're there for like 8 nights. So the way I see it is, I'm a resident. I live here. That's how I see it. This is my house, and you're a guest, but I'm a resident. And if you kind of set that mentality, people will adjust. Like one time I walk in. And one time, there's a guy having a conversation with 2 other people in the bathroom. And I walk in, I'm tired, I want to take a shower. I always use the same shower. There's 3 showers, I use the same one. And if it's unavailable, I'm going to wait. Same shower. Because there's 3 showers, but only one of them has a mirror on the inside. So if I'm looking to shave, I need that one. So I'm going to wait. Well, I walk in and I go into the shower, and one of the guys has the balls to tell me I was going to use that shower. And I said, oh, okay, no problem. I'll see you in a bit. What the fuck? You think you're going to have a full-blown conversation and reserve the rights to this shower? I live here. You're a guest. This is my shower. It was so annoying. But, eventually you learn to work with people, and you get to meet some of them, and, and then before you know it, they're gone. So it was good. And you're really being... you're being physically fit. It takes a toll on the body. A few days in, I get a blister on my foot, which then promptly spread and became an infection. It's now totally gone now. My foot looks totally healed. But the reason I mention this is because at one point during the trip, we're climbing a hill, but it's really a mountain. I'll show you a photo of this in a bit. It's basically a mountain, okay? The name of the park is Morinuma, Moernuma, Morinuma Park in Sapporo. It's in the north of Japan. This hill is massive, and it's a steep hill, okay? So it's basically a mountain. My foot's all fucked up. I'm walking, I'm in pain, dude. I'm struggling to climb this mountain because of the damage to my right foot. I get to the top, and there's some other tourists up there. And there's some nice Canadian people. I celebrate. When I get to the top, I walk over on my own. I raise my arms. I'm proud of myself for what I just did. I'm having a great time. I feel very good. Very proud of myself. I meet some Canadians. We're talking. They're nice people. They're good people. It's a mother, a father, and her son. Father's white. Mother is Asian. Son is Asian. Okay? So we're having a nice conversation. They're lovely people. We part ways. They go down the mountain. We run into them like the next day at night or something like that. Like 2 days later at night in the middle of the city. What are the odds of that?
Yeah.
Isn't that crazy? We run into them. We're talking. And this time we have a full conversation. We was talking for like an hour. It was me, my two buddies, and then the three of them, the three Canadians. Well, at one point during the conversation, the mother, the Asian mom, speaks English. They're Canadians. She looks to me. She says, she says to me, are you into fitness? That's what she asked me. Are you into fitness? I said, look at me. No, I'm not into fitness. And she says, well, why not? And I said, I don't know. I mean, it's just, well, the truth of the matter is I have other things going on. The truth of the matter is my life is too entertaining. I don't have time to go to the gym. That's the honest truth. When I'm in New Jersey, I'll go every once in a while because I live a domesticated life up there, but when I'm in the South, I'm a hooligan. I've got friends. I'm going all over the place, whatever. And then she says, well, I could tell that you're not into fitness because I saw you climbing that mountain. That's what she says to me. This bitch. That's what she says to me.
No way.
My two friends here, now they're ragging on me for the whole rest of the trip. I'm a cripple. My foot's all fucked up. That's why I can't climb the mountain. But she says to me, yeah, you should really work on your cardiovascular health. That's what she tells me. The gall of this woman. I've got excellent cardiovascular health. I just did the Blue Ridge Parkway a day and a half ago. Just like literally yesterday. I'm climbing up a trail or whatever. I'm doing great. I'm talking. I'm not even huffing and puffing. I'm dancing up these stairs. So I've got impeccable, but that really got under my skin. That bothered me. It still, you could tell it still bothers me that she said that. Because they were such nice people, and then my view of that, I put on a nice face. But in my mind, I was like, these fucking Canadians. That's what they always do. They slide in the insults. That's how Canadians are. It's in their nature. It's terrible. So, and another thing I want to talk about with Japanese culture, and I want to prepare the audience for this, is it's a very bisexual. If you go to Japan straight, you're probably going to leave bisexual, is what I would say. And the reason I say that is because so many aspects of the culture, like here's an example. The men are so handsome. They're great looking guys. Like they've got excellent skin, great fashion. Like Americans, they just like, look what you're wearing. Like,
dude, I just woke up. Like,
well, I did too. I mean, at least I got something on. I drove here. So
fair.
That Americans operate differently, right? They would never be seen in public like this.
I'm in my room.
Well, they would never be seen by anybody. I know we're in your room, but still, I'm bragging on you a little bit here. But my point is, like, the Japanese, they don't do that. You come over, they've got a full meal for you. They look nice, beautiful. They're wearing suits on the train. Impeccable style. The men and the women. I learned a few things over there from the men. Watches and bullshit like that. So, it's very rare in Japan that you see somebody and you're like, my God, it hurts to look at them. You understand what I'm trying to say to you? Like, that doesn't really happen a lot. But in the United States, that happens to me very often. It's very common in the United States. Like my career path is a magnet for ugly people. Like what I do, my line of work, everybody's ugly. Because if you're good looking, the way you're treated by society, you're going to become more social. Because good looking people talk to them. Then from a young age, then you learn how to talk to others, you gain social skills. And when it's time for you to enter the free market, well, what's your skill set? Well, you're good at talking to people. So then you do client-facing work. But, rejects like us, we're unsocialized. So we're behind the computer and we have to get good at math just to even survive in this world. We have to make money somehow, right? So my career is a magnet for ugly people, like people that you can't even stand to look at. And the problem with ugly people is I don't trust them because, well, think about it. If you're ugly, you've never been given anything in your life. If you're an ugly person, nobody has ever handed you something for nothing. Attractive people, they get handed something for nothing. But ugly people, they've got to fight. They've got to claw to survive. You know what I'm trying to say to you? Right. And because of that, they develop habits like cheating, stealing, lying. It's what they have to do because it's the only way they could survive. This is how I feel. This is my theory, right? Okay. And that's why all the really, really successful people are ugly because they got so good at that craft. Have you seen these politicians? Looks like they're going to melt. Like, they're fucking hideous, these people. And it's not even Americans, it's the whole world. When I meet an attractive person, I want to make their life easier. You know what I'm trying to say? I want to give them things for free. Man or woman, I want to make their life easier. Doesn't matter who they are. You know what I'm trying to say to you? I want to make their life easy. I don't even want them to ask. I just want to do it without them asking. Whatever they need. But you can't laugh. It makes me laugh. But when I'm around ugly people, I get uncomfortable. You can't even look at them. I mean, it's hard to do. So what I'm trying to say, and I feel uncomfortable when they get too close, and I get hives and I get hot. So, but when you're in Japan, this isn't really a problem that you have to deal with. So, but then when I come back to the States and immediately it hits you in the face, you can smell them around the corner, So they have a really good sense of fashion over there, and it's an incredible culture. But, the things I'm saying to you right now about how you're just inundated with attractive people, before you know it, I was, and I'm just going to be honest. By the end, I was looking at the men. I was like, my God, he's handsome. They're like genetic specimens. And you know why that is? It's because of the culture in Japan. This doesn't exist anymore. But it used to be in Japan where like they would do, what's that called? Eugenics. Is that what that's called? Selective breeding. Yeah. Like the shogun and the most elite samurai, they would have all the kids. And like that has tag-along effects even to this day. So the genetically weak and inferior have basically been rooted out of the society. So now you're dealing with, and look, there's always some ugly people everywhere you go. But really you're dealing with the best of the best over here, and you've got to compete. And the way they do that is they have to dress well, because being physically attractive in Japan isn't enough. It's not enough because everybody's attractive, So they have to impress with like their clothing and other things to have identity, quote unquote identity. But being in Japan, in extreme cases, it might even make you gay. They got this thing called the bidet. Have you heard of this? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Dude. And I mean, this might sound weird to say, but like when that water hits your asshole at the right angle, it's an incredible experience. And you're just totally dialed in. But you can't, and then it's after a few, but the water pressure is really high. So after a few seconds, you feel uncomfortable and you have to stop. But that first hit, it's like taking a nice shit and then you just get cleaned out right away. It's a good feeling. No toilet paper, but you're just cleansed, A bidet, it's a bisexual experience, But then you got gay experiences. They've got this thing called an onsen. You heard of this? Dude, this is an insane thing. So they've got this thing called an onsen, which we went to. Okay, we went to, and what an onsen is they have hot water, boiling water. Okay, and the water is full of different minerals. You've got ferrous water, which is water with a high concentration of iron. You have sulfuric water, which is sulfur. They throw some sulfur in there. It smells like rotten eggs. They've got ferrous sulfate. You get that double combo. You get the iron and the sulfur. They have salt water. They have just piping hot. They've got everything. They've got like 14 different types. But here's the problem. You have to be naked.
Oh.
You have to be. It's not even optional. You have to be. The first time I walked in, I saw more penises than I saw in my whole life. I walk in 10 seconds. They're basically coming out of the woodwork. There's so many. It's uncomfortable. I walked in the first time I had to leave. I wasn't actually mentally prepared for what happened. So the first time I went, I had to leave. And then I went back later that night because you have to do it. You have to do it. If you're in Japan, you have to do it. You got to become... Remember, when I was in India, I lived as one of the people. Remember?
Yeah.
Well, when I'm in Japan, when you go somewhere, you got to live as one of the people. And is this me doing cognitive dissonance? Maybe. But you got to live as one of the people. So you have to have the naked onsen experience. So what you do is they give you a hand towel, okay? And you're supposed to put it on your head. And you put it flat on your head. I'm not joking. You put it flat on your head. And it's a washcloth. It's not big, okay? It's a washcloth. You put it flat on your head. And you're supposed to do that because you're not supposed to get your hair wet. And the reason for that is, well, let me go from the start. So you walk in and they separate the men and the women. Women went to the right, men went to the left. They hand you a washcloth. You go to the left. Now, once you walk in, the second you walk in, everybody is naked. It's the changing room. You've got people socializing. They're strangers. They've never met each other. Naked, totally naked, conversing. You've got children running around naked. Tons of them. Honestly, when I went at night, there were more kids than adults.
That's weird.
And they're like, it's super weird. You feel uncomfortable. You feel like because you like, this is in the, like, you would go to jail for life in the United States, but over there it's totally normal. You know? So everybody is naked. You declothe. You put your clothes in a basket. There's no crime in Japan, no theft ever in Japan, ever. Unless the immigrants. But Japanese people, they don't steal. So you just put your clothes in a basket and you walk away. And they'll be there when you get back. Then you go into the onsen. Once you walk in, the humidity hits you because the water is hot water. And you have to shower yourself first. Now, with the shower, you sit on a stool. The stool is the height of a backpack. For those who know how tall a backpack would be. You're sitting on a stool, so you're in a deep squat. You're sitting on this stool. And you've got a shower head, and there's 50 of them lined up in a straight line. You got 50 naked guys sitting on the stool, power washing themselves. Then when you're power washed, you put your washcloth on your head, and then you get in the water. The water is so hot that you feel like your skin is going to boil off. But you acclimate. If I had to guess right now, it might have legitimately been like 250 degree water. Like, the water's boiling. It's bubbling and evaporating in real time. So it's definitely above 212 Fahrenheit, for sure. Because you're watching the evaporation in real time. There's a few of them that are like ice baths, but the vast majority of them are hot water. But some of them, like, you can specifically choose to do a cold plunge. Okay. So, you're in the water, and you're supposed to just let the minerals absorb into your skin. And it's so hot that, like, it opens up your pores. It's like, when I left, I felt great. But what I'm trying to say is like just the nudity, you have to prepare for that. And like when you're walking around in this place, I in my head I call it the pecker order. Not pecking, but pecker. Because you've got these guys who like give you full frontal. Like most people, even though they're naked, they'll kind of like, people kind of walk around and no one's really looking and everybody knows it's a little weird, even the Japanese. By the way, I was like the only white guy in there. I should mention that. Everyone else is Japanese. But like people kind of keep to themselves. You keep to yourself. But you've got a few of these guys who want to like assert dominance. It's fucking weird. So they're walking straight at you naked. And they're like, it's like a game of chicken. Like they want you to move. Like they want to make you feel uncomfortable. They want to like establish a pecker order. And like they're at the top, It was so strange. But you see, so that is another bisexual experience in Japan. So, or honestly, homo experience at that point. Because there's no women around, so there's just naked guys. So you got, between the onsen, the good-looking people, and the bidets, you got to go there very confident in your sexuality, Because if you're insecure about it, like maybe a person who is unsure about where they land, they should go to Japan, If you go to an onsen, you'll find out real quick which way you swing, Like, that's what I'm trying to say. There's a very low percentage of Christians over there. Very low percentage of Christians. And after this, we'll take a short commercial break. I'm getting a little thirsty. But I want to talk about how there's very few Christians in Japan. And I'll never understand all this hype with this Buddha guy. He's everywhere in Japan. Buddha this, Buddha that. Who's this, Buddha what? It's everywhere. You go to the art museums, statues in public. Buddha is everywhere. And I think that Japan is a really untapped market for Christians. We could probably get to work over there. We can make them find Jesus, Like we could send some missionaries and whatnot. Especially because Japan's basically an American colony. American bases everywhere. We got tons of soldiers over there. I'm surprised we never gave these people a little dosage of Christianity. And we probably did, but it's very rare. I basically saw none, man. And I thought that was strange. But, good for them. But most of the country's atheist. That's what I'm trying to say. So we really have no competition. It's just an untapped market. And that's hard to find these days. So we should really get to work because if the Arabs get over there, they'll dominate. Like the Arabs with Sharia, they'll take over that place. So we have to get there before they do. Because if we think the Indian immigration is going to destroy Japan, Sharia law, that shit will destroy Japan. No contest. You've got people in the United States now. What's that town? It's like where Ilhan Omar is from. It's in the United States. Is it Minnesota? You could look this up for me. Dearborn, Michigan? That might be it. I'm not too sure. But you've got a place in the United States now where the local police, have Arabic on their patches. Like the police insignia is in Arabic. We gotta stop that shit right now. Like this cannot go on.
It is Minnesota.
It's Minnesota.
Part of Minneapolis.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that, Kabetti. So we've got, or producer, excuse me. Oh no.
Cut that out.
Yeah. Let's see what we got. But yeah, so. But they've got, but all I'm trying to say is up here in the Great Lakes region, we've got a lot of Arabs, and they're starting to take over. They're asking American citizens, they're doing interviews on the street, they're saying, they're going up to an Arab immigrant, they're saying, would you rather live under Sharia law or American law? And these Americans are saying Sharia law. See, that's a problem. And I pray that Japan doesn't fall to that same fate. So we're going to take a short break. We're going to come back and maybe do a few more minutes of Japan. And then we've got a few other very, very important topics to talk about. From the company that started with the dream of making every visit to the bathroom unforgettable, Toto entered into the market with their version of the toilet, the Turbo Bidet. Now, Japan's #1 exporter of luxury and lifestyle is ready to burst into the American market with their newest product, MedBed. After automating the cleanup of your daily number 2, Toto is now looking to automate and elevate the most sacrosanct ritual of a balanced hygiene routine, the shower. Just 15 minutes in medbed will fully sanitize you with a soap bath, spray, and sauna to dry off. Medbed comes with additional features, including a vitals screening, built-in stereo, Bluetooth calling, massage treatment, and much more, all while laying on your back to relax. It is time to access your personal heaven with Medbed. Thank you to Toto for sponsoring this episode and for the premium luxury bidet that they installed at my home, at my residence. We're now going to talk a little bit more about Japan in a micro segment here. We're going to talk baseball. The Japanese love baseball. They have 12 major league teams split into 2 leagues of 6. But if my memory is correct, 5 of their 12 baseball teams are all either in Tokyo or suburbs of Tokyo, which makes sense given the population spread of the country. What I did notice at this Japanese, so I went to a game. I went to a Japanese game. I went to a game in the city of Nagoya. It is south of Tokyo, but north of Kyoto. It's the big city in between. And really, there's really no tourism there. Like we went there for half a day and we knocked out the whole city. Like by the end of the day, there was nothing left to do as a tourist. But we saw a baseball game. And it was the Tokyo Dragons versus it was called the Nagoya Dragons, versus the Tokyo Giants. And what's really funny about Japanese baseball teams is their color schemes and their logos and the font of their teams directly copy American teams. For example, the Nagoya Chinchuri Dragons, they were the exact same color and uniforms as the LA Dodgers, blue and white, and the font is identical. And the Tokyo Giants, they look like the what's that black and white team? Is it called the Padres? I actually forget, but it's like there's a black and yellow. I knew this a moment ago, but
White Sox.
Black and yellow.
Oh, black and yellow.
Yeah. What baseball team in the United States? Is it Pittsburgh something? Why do I feel like it's Pittsburgh?
It might be. It sounds like
I just think of Steelers with black and yellow. We'll figure it out.
the
Anyways,
Pirates.
what's up?
The Pirates.
Pirates. Thank you. So the Tokyo Giants, it's black and yellow, and their font looks like the Pirates. So all of their 12 teams are derivatives of American teams, which is super funny. And a few American players are over there. While we were watching the game, a white guy came up and I was like, that looks like an American. And sure enough, he is a former MLB player. The Japan League is less competitive, so you don't have to be as good to you don't have to be as good to be really good in Japan. Hopefully that made sense. Like the best athletes come to the American market. But like if you're kind of washed up at the end of your career, like you could go over to Japan and like make some good money and like play some good baseball, you know? So what makes it incredible was the energy in the crowd. So, and this is unique, and this was true at both games I've been to, and I verified it online. When you go to a Japanese baseball game in the outfield, they've got multiple sections. Let's just ballpark it and say 300 seats. So 3 sections. And those seats are reserved for the volunteer band for the home team. The volunteer band gets 3 sections. The away team volunteer band, I'm emphasizing volunteer because you are not paid to do this. The away team's volunteer band, they get 1 section. So the home team band has more seats than the away team band. So they're naturally going to be louder. And Japan is a relatively small country, and with the bullet train, you can be anywhere within like 9 hours. So it's like having these bands that volunteer for weekend games, like it's totally doable. And I'm sure they have them even for week games. My only point is they sing and play instruments for the entire baseball game. They never stop. Like at an American baseball game, there'll be silence. People are watching the game intently. Every once in a while, I'll go do do do, and like the sirens will come on, and they'll play like pre-recorded music. At the Japanese game, it's all from live music. The orchestra in the outfield. They have conductors, trombones, drums, full-on instruments in the outfield, and they're volunteers. And each team has multiple chants, and they're catchy, dude. Like people are going like And not only do they have a chant, but like there's like dance moves with it. It's like people like doing different things, and like certain like the MVP, like the all-star players, they have like their own chant. So like when they come up to bat, everyone's like singing their chant. It's super super cool. And the band that's playing is whichever team is currently on offense. So the batting team, their band plays, and then they stop when the other team goes up to bat. But one of the bands is always playing for all 9 innings. It's really cool. Before the game, they do like a concert. They have cheerleaders come out, which is kind of common in like football, but like it's an insane spectacle. Like they got this jersey. They got like the jersey, the baseball jersey was like the size. It went from home plate to second base. It was a massive shirt. It's like the size of a flag, like a Jap, like like countries lay out the flag. It was like that. It was a jersey, and they got people like waving it. They have fireworks going off, dancing, crazy stuff before the game. It was excellent. Such a great experience. After the game ends, people are walking around picking up garbage that isn't even theirs. But there's basically no garbage to begin with. Like people are super cleanly. Like when we left that stadium, I turned around, it was spotless. Like an American game, it's gone to shit. Like there's stuff everywhere. People are super energetic. There was a guy behind me who was like always singing and like with the chants, and they're not even plants, they're just fans. Like people are super passionate about it. Lots of young people. It was an incredible experience. It was in a dome, air conditioned, so we're not even hot. It was legendary. Both baseball games I've been to in Japan surpass any of the games I've been to in the United States. And I've been to quite a few games in the US. Also, the raw gameplay. They play on turf, which is more fun to watch because the ball bounces, and it just, you get a lot more hits and it's more fun. And the Japanese, they're small people. They've got like my build. So in America, it's either strikeouts or home runs. So it could get kind of boring to watch in the United States. In Japan, basically no home runs. They're small guys. So it's a lot of base hits. And they've got to it's strategic. They're aiming for the gap in the players. Like, it's much more fun to watch. There's a science to it. The United States is more brute force. Just hit the ball as hard as you can, hope you get a home run. But in Japan, the players, their arms aren't as strong, so therefore they throw the ball slower. So like if you hit it in the infield, you might actually be safe. And all the players are faster because they weigh less and they have shorter height. Like Aaron Judge is so slow. The dude can barely even move, But like in Japan, but he hits home runs. In Japan, they're all like nimble and fast. So a grounder to third, they might be safe at first. It's really, really fun to watch. Lots of like double and triple plays because you very often have like bases loaded. It's just more dynamic to watch as a viewer because lots of guys are getting hits. Whereas in American ball, the innings are usually quick. Like I'm pulling this number out of my ass, but like the average MLB inning is probably 5 batters, so 3 outs and maybe 2 hits. I don't even know. But like in Japan, one of the innings went for like 40 minutes. Damn. Because the team just kept hitting singles with long at-bats, and they scored a bunch of runs. It's like people are hitting, and there's no outs, and it just keeps going. It's a ton of fun. Now, what I will say is we should get some Dominicans over there. We would just dominate. So we got to infect this place. We got to colonize this island. If the Dominicans start playing Japanese ball, NPB, the Nippon Professional Baseball League, I think that's what it stands for. If we get into the NPB, us Dominicans, we'll totally dominate the sport. So, I don't know. Maybe they might keep us out on purpose because they know that we'll take over. But it was a lot of fun. We had a great time. And before we move on, I do want to talk about, I want to talk a little bit about some negative aspects of Japan. Specifically, I want to talk about the work culture, the drinking culture, and the sexual assault of women in urban areas. We'll start with that one. Japan has some of the highest rates of sexual assault. I think, it's very in the developed world. That is not committed by immigrants as well. It's like Japanese men are like known to like sexually assault women. But the way it works is like they like grope them. It's very weird. And like I'm not condoning this, like it's actually disgusting and sad. But what they do is they do it on the subway. Because when the subway is super crowded, they can just like play dumb. So like that's a really gross part of the society. And I actually witnessed it once. I legitimately saw it and I felt sick. But like you can't even do anything because you see it happening 20 feet in front of you, but between you and the incident, there's literally like 35 people. Like you can't even move. You can't move anything. Your arms are up against you. You're stuffed in the train, like fish in a barrel. So that's one huge negative aspect. So on the train, there are train cars just for women. Like men can't even go on the train car, and that's great. But during traffic hour, that car gets full first, and then the women can either just wait for the next train, which will probably be just as full, or they can like just take a chance, and it's really sad. That's one problem. Another is the drinking culture. Being a Japanese citizen is super depressing. As a visitor, it's a great place to visit, incredible to visit, but the life of the average Japanese person is miserable. They work super long hours, and then they like the rate of alcoholism is very high, and they don't process alcohol as well as other cultures. Like genetically, Japanese people have trouble like digesting and processing alcohol, so they get like very drunk pretty quickly. So that culture of that drinking culture is really detrimental to the society. But yet it's very pervasive, and like people do it as like a coping mechanism. And the work hours are crazy. People work like 7 a.m. to like 6 p.m. or 7 p.m. And that's if you have like a corporate job. They call those, there's a name for it. There's a Japanese term for it, but it basically just translates to like corporate man. And that's because Japan is a two-tiered society. You could either work for a large multinational company, like Toyota, for example, and you're working long, long shifts as a corporate man, but you're making a ton of money, or you're just a regular person working at a shop and like you have a lower middle class lifestyle. There's pretty much no middle class in Japan. Now, if you are in the lower middle class, you can still afford a car. The country is much more affordable than ours. But like if you have a corporate job and if you're wealthy, your wealth just is like dominates everyone else around you. And it's like very strange. Like it's pretty weird. Like the dynamic there. So those are some pretty toxic aspects of the culture. And then the last thing I want to talk about is an interaction I had with some other tourists. So, and I noticed this in India the few times I saw them, but a lot in Japan. No matter where we go on Earth, no matter where we go, us Americans are easy to spot. We're very easy to spot. It's very easy to spot an American even against like other white people. And we do some things that other nationalities don't do. Number one, we speak very loudly in public. I do this as well. We speak very loudly in public. The only people that speak louder than us in public are the Chinese. They won't shut the fuck up. They're so fucking loud. We were on the train, and you're bing bang hong, hee hao, and you're like, God damn it, and they won't shut up. It's fucking Mandarin. And all the Japanese people, the Japanese hate the Chinese. I should mention that because of historical conflicts, the rape of Nanking, lots of reasons going on here. You know what the rape of Nanking was? In World War II, Japan invaded northern China. Northern China is called Manchuria. There's a great movie called The Manchurian Candidate, separate discussion. There is, in the above Beijing, pretty much anything in China that is northeast of Beijing would be considered Manchuria. And in Manchuria, there's a city called Nanking. And Manchuria historically had lots of natural resources. So in World War II, Japan, the island of Japan, has very few natural resources. Even to this day, Japan imports all of their oil, all of it. And that is why there's so many solar panels and nuclear plants around the country, because they have no non-renewable energy. So they either have to use renewables or they have to import oil. But Japan invaded Manchuria, and it was called the Rape of Nanking, when Japanese soldiers raped and murdered all the women, children, and they just killed the men. But they raped and then murdered all the women in Nanking, China. It was brutal. Like it's one of the worst atrocities ever documented, and it was committed by the Japanese against the Chinese. But centuries before, the Chinese were committing war atrocities against the Japanese. They hate each other. It goes back as far as Israel and Palestine. Like, it's crazy. So, but the people, the Chinese people on the train are so loud. So we Americans, we lean on things. We lean against a wall. We might prop ourselves. It's called the American lean. You could Google it if you want. It's just the basic concept that, like, other white people don't lean on things. We lean on the counter. We lean. And other cultures don't do that. They stand up straight, even if they're waiting in line.
On walls or anything?
No, they don't. Like,
Wow.
Americans do, though.
Yeah.
Right. It's the American lean. So, and you're walking around, and I'm walking around, I'm like leaning, like they're Americans. Like, it's not 100% rule. It's not like a guarantee, but it's more likely than not. So, and then I want to tell a little story about when I was in the hostel. I was explaining the concept of Buc-ee's, the gas station, to an Englishman, a guy from England. And he was totally fascinated by the concept of a Buc-ee's. Everything about it, the size of it, that it's like a tourist attraction, but it's a gas station, like that there's a gift shop inside. And you know, and that's how our conversation started. And then our conversation evolved into imperialism and colonialism, and that's one thing led to another, right? And then we end up talking about colonialism because Japan is an American colony, for all effective purposes. We control their economy, we control their foreign exchange, we control their trade, we literally control their military. We occupy their country. We have since World War II. We've never left. The island of Okinawa, for example, is owned by the United States. We have a massive military base there. So I mention all this because we were talking about, the Englishman says to me, don't you think there's some cognitive dissonance in the American psyche? Because on one hand, Americans pride themselves on being isolationist, and they don't want to be involved or bothered with other countries. And that's what the whole modern Republican movement is, isolationism. But the cognitive dissonance is that we have an entitled way about us, and we expect everyone on earth to conform to what we want. So on one hand, we have the entitled imperialist mindset of dealing with other countries, but on the other hand, we don't want to get involved with other countries. Like, we want it both ways. And he was talking to me about that, and he made an excellent point. And it was a really poignant conversation. Separate topic, so I'm gonna leave it there. And it's not necessarily the best content for this episode. But then one thing led to another, and then we were talking about he started talking about immigration, because there's a lot of like talk in the United States about immigration right now. And he told me that what we're doing is right. That was very fascinating to hear. That, like, the deportations we're doing are the right thing to do. And, like, even though we're deporting people that have jobs, even though the treatment is harsh, and, like, this is not my feelings. I don't feel this way, but he felt this way. And he kind of enlightened me, and he really evolved my perspective, because he told me what happens at the other side of it. England has been dominated. England doesn't even exist anymore, in the sense of, the most common name for newborn baby boys in England is Mohammed. Large portions of English government, whether it be local or federal, all chains of the government, judges, everything, now Arabs, Muslims running the country. You have entire communities and cities that are full of garbage because Arabs don't know how to take care of things, like all of their in general. Okay, we know what's going on over there in the Middle East, like the way they treat their like territories and shit. Like, they don't have the sense of national pride that the English do, because they're not English. They are immigrants that haven't assimilated. So that's the point he was trying to make to me. He was trying to make the point that, like, he was arguing that America is making the right decision, because although it is viewed as, and although it is inhumane now, the consequences of not taking this action is that our country, the fabric of America, no longer even exists. And he explained how just in his lifetime, the guy was approximately 35. By the way, if you're 35, you shouldn't be staying in a hostel. But he was 35, and he was explaining to me how in his lifetime, like the entire demographic and fabric of his country has completely broken down and changed. And now like it's unsafe for women to walk alone in public because they're getting attacked by Arabs, like all of that stuff. And I'm listening to one guy's opinion, but I actually then did some research, and a lot, and actually a lot of what he's saying is true, like crime rates from Arabs, like all of that. So, you know, it really opened my eyes. And then he started talking about, and this is what he told me. This is something he said to me. He said to me, the English fought for thousands of years to conquer their island and to take it from nearly identical ethnic groups, the Scots, the Welsh, and the Irish, only to then be supplanted by much more formidable foes, groups that can reproduce no matter the conditions, Indians and Arabs. That's just a direct quote. I wrote it in my phone. I was like, can you say that again? I wrote it in my phone. But that's a crazy thing. I'm going to say it again. The English fought for thousands of years to conquer their island and take it from nearly identical ethnic groups, the Scots, Welsh, and Irish, only to be supplanted by much more formidable foes, groups that can reproduce no matter the conditions, Indians and Arabs. Fascinating, right? And like he was telling me that his country doesn't exist anymore. And he's like accepted that, and there's no going back. Which is crazy. And he's right. They spent thousands of years starving the Irish, not thousands, hundreds of years starving the Irish. You know, the Welsh language and ethnic identity is basically gone. You know, we call it the United Kingdoms because it's the kingdoms of Wales or whatever. But you know, it's, you know, the English Empire homogenized, culturally homogenized the British Isles, you know? But now they've been totally supplanted by Arabs and Indians. And he's right. He's 100% right in terms of how the country has fallen. And it was, you know, it was unchecked immigration. And as he says, you know, he was basically telling me that, like, the English, they don't really reproduce unless they can afford it. But he was telling me that like these other immigrant groups, they do no matter what. It's pretty interesting. You know, now the English, you know, are and always will be, you know, an insufferable people. You know, they always will be. They're very posh. Even this guy, very posh, you know? But that just because of that, it was, you know, that doesn't necessarily discredit what he was saying. And, you know, and they're also a very envious people. Like the English always wanted what, like throughout history, the English always wanted what other people had, you know? And it was that envy that drove them to become, you know, fierce conquerors that took over the world. Like their constant desire for more, you know, it was their insatiable desire for more that led them to their ruin, right? So it was that, you know, they were fierce conquerors, but they grew soft after World War II. They did. And you know, they pacified France, and they subjugated the Irish, and they had to give up all their colonies. The United States forced England to give up all their colonies, but the truth of the matter is, after World War II, the English Empire was so weak that they could no longer sustain it. You know, they could no longer use force to uphold the colonies that they have. You know, so... And then he was asking me about the United States. And when I was describing the United States, I was describing to him the culture that we have of domination. You know, the American culture of domination. We apply it to warfare. Like we use warlike language in all parts of our life. Like even at work. Like, we're in the trenches. You know, that's like something people will say at work, you know, or debrief. Or, you know, there's all these different euphemisms and English expressions that we use in all parts of life, but they're all war terms, you know? Put a pin in that. That means to disarm a grenade, you know? Because like, you put the pin back in. Like there's so many different terms that are pervasive in our culture that are like about violence and domination. And when I was telling the Englishman about this, I could see the fire in his eyes. And he remembered what his country used to be. But now it's nothing, you know? In a very real sense, the United States is the last bastion of the West. You know, do you know what the West is, like culturally, what that concept is, producer?
No.
The East versus the West. So like the East is considered like the Asian peoples, and the West is considered the European peoples, the white peoples. It's not a perfect concept because like, are Latin Americans in the West? Technically yes, but their culture is distinct. And also the entire continent of Africa is just removed from the equation entirely. And like the Middle East, they're considered the East, but they're their own thing as well. The point I'm trying to make is the West is definitely an identifiable group. The West would be New Zealand, Australia, the United States, Canada, and Europe, mainland Europe, even including Russia. And, the Englishman was telling me that the United States is the last bastion of the West, that France has fallen, England has fallen, Germany has fallen, that they're unrecognizable, that their economies have stagnated, that their populations are dying out. And it was almost like he was begging me to single-handedly save the country. It was a fascinating conversation I had with him. And he was basically saying that, like I said before, like the country of the United States is the last bastion of the West, and we have to preserve the legacy of. And he said to me, the guy was really smart. That was very obvious to me. Like, he knew his history. He was also bigoted, but he was smart. But the thing is, like, he was bigoted, but after hearing what he said, his bigotry kind of seemed valid. Like, what he was telling me is, like, his whole country's gone to shit. I mean, I haven't been to England, but, that's what he was telling me. But he described to me that, like, it used to be that France carried the legacy of Napoleon, and that England carried the legacy of King James and the Magna Carta, and that Italy carried the legacy of Rome. There's a great quote in The Sopranos where they're beating up a Jewish guy who won't pay them back money, and the Jewish guy looks up to Tony, like to the Italian, like to Tony and his other mobsters, and the Jewish guy says, for 300 years, the Jewish people survived the oppression of the Romans. Look where the Romans are now. And then Tony says, you're looking at them, like, because like they're the Romans, like, because Tony is the descendant of Italy, right? And this guy was like, Italy carried the torch and was the inheritor of Rome. Vatican City was the Holy Roman Empire, and like he kept going on and on and on about like all these different legacies, the Renaissance. He was bringing up the Renaissance, and he was like, but that's all gone now. All of those have been collapsed into one place, and that one place is America. The legacy of Rome, that's what he said. He was like, the legacy of Rome, he was like, the Roman legacy, the Italian heritage, it lives on in America more than it does in Italy. That might be bullshit. But these are the things he was telling me, okay? And like, I got his point. He was like, the rights of man with Magna Carta, we have no rights anymore. People go to jail or get fined for posting things on social media. That's absurd. That's insane. He was like, the rights of man are gone at home. So like he was just basically getting at like that the United States is the last champion of the West. And it's had me thinking a lot recently because that entire mentality and concept like directly clashes with a lot of my beliefs, And also I said to him, I was pushing back a lot. And I was like, well, just because people immigrate to the United States doesn't mean that they can't become westernized. Like, they can assimilate. I was like, my dad's an immigrant. My dad assimilated. I'm westernized. My dad is westernized. He liked that term, so I kept using it, And he was like, yeah. And like I got him to like tepidly agree, but like, so people come to this country from all over the world and they can assimilate and become westernized. And I guess in this guy's definition, carry the torch of the Magna Carta, whatever, like in his worldview, right? But he has got me thinking, and my feelings are starting to change about people who come here and don't assimilate. That is where my feelings are starting to change,
people that immigrate to the United States and don't assimilate. My worldview used to be that the United States is a melting pot. So when people come here, they will kind of, they're like, if their culture is my right hand and the rest of America's culture is my left hand, I used to think that both hands would get closer together, and that would be melting into the pot. So people would assimilate and become more Americanized, but never completely Americanized, but that the idea of America would change. That's like what I was trying to think. That's what I was like. That's what my worldview used to be. But then I started thinking, and there are just large groups of people in the United States that never assimilate and have no interest in doing so. They only have kids with their own people. They fly their home country's flag, not the American flag. Things like that is what I'm trying to say. And I don't have a crystallized opinion on it yet, but it's just something that's been on my mind. I've been thinking about a lot, which would be, immigrant groups. And there's plenty of immigrant groups. Like, there's tons of them. And it's not even all of them. Like, plenty of Indians assimilate. Plenty of Indians don't. Plenty of Latinos assimilate. Plenty of them don't. I was in Texas, and I will tell you, plenty of Latinos don't assimilate. And those are my own people, right? Plenty of Cubans assimilate. Well, they're Latino, but down in Miami, plenty of them don't, right? So it's gotten my mind thinking about immigrant groups that don't assimilate. And I don't actually have crystallized opinions yet, but this guy who is a very radical person, and sitting here, I can say that objectively. I don't think everything he said was 100% wrong, is what I'm trying to say. I think there was some seeds of truth in what he said. And I don't know how much of it was true, certainly less than half. But I'm trying to say, I've really been thinking about that conversation I had with him, because by far it was the most interesting conversation I had with a non-Japanese person when I was in Japan. And the way it happened was, what's it called? Whenever I travel, I journal. And the room that we were staying in, I mentioned earlier, was the size of like a king-size bed. It was a pretty small room. So I would go journal in the common area. And that's where he was. And he saw me journaling, and then he started talking to me. So it was pretty interesting. Anyways, I think there's a lot of food for thought there. And we are now going to switch it up, and we're going to talk economics. Super big segment today. We're going to cut to an ad break. Do you like when your server watches you for the entirety of your meal? Now, what if they were also retarded and crippled with disease that made it impossible to work elsewhere? Would you be interested in holding a conversation for the duration of your stay as your server watched you through a robot mounted to your table? Well, lucky you, because the future is now at the New Dawn Cafe. New Dawn offers employment to those otherwise unable to work by allowing them to video call into a table-mounted robot which acts as a restaurant server. By giving work opportunities to the disabled, owners of this growing chain can receive government tax cuts due to their employment practices, save money on wages, and gain good publicity through their humanitarianism and futuristic concept. As Western nations face labor shortages, it is necessary to get everyone involved in the economy. Welcome to the new dawn of dining. It's good to be in something from the ground floor, but when I look at the United States and our economy, I realize that I came too late for that, Lately I've been feeling that I came in at the end. I think the best is over. And the reason I feel that way is I've been learning about this housing market that we got going on and the unaffordability of housing. And I want to talk some numbers with housing, because I did a little bit of it last episode, and then I went further down the rabbit hole. There are now more home buyers over the age of 70 than under the age of 35 in the United States. You see, in my mind, when I'm over 70, I am done buying houses. But the fact that there are more home buyers over 70 buying houses than under 35 is shocking. Totally shocking. It gives me pause. We have the top 10% of stocks are now 75% of the entire market. That is the most extreme measure since 2007, when it was 73%. And we all know what happened in 2008. And before that, the top 10% of stocks were 74% of the market in 1929. It's right before the Great Depression. So these are unprecedented statistics that we're working with right now. We've got more old people buying houses than young ones. We have a massively inflated stock market. We just got news about a new Ponzi scheme that's going on. News just came out yesterday, maybe the day before. It's $40 billion. So here's what we're going to do. Let's try to imagine this together. We're going to get OpenAI, which is a company that, actually, no, let's make it even easier. We're going to do Oracle, okay? Oracle makes, they make cloud computing, servers, technology services company, okay? Oracle is going to issue debt, corporate bonds. They're going to issue corporate debt. And they're going to raise $40 billion through corporate debt. Insane amount of money to be putting as debt on your balance sheet. I mean, by any stretch of the imagination, we would call this fiscally irresponsible. $40 billion is more than most countries' military budgets. It's larger than most government departments' entire budgets in the United States as well. Huge amount of money. They're going to borrow $40 billion. They're then going to give that money to NVIDIA. Okay? They're going to give that money to NVIDIA. They're going to make an investment in NVIDIA. That's what they're calling it. They're going to make an investment in NVIDIA. NVIDIA is going to then make a $40 billion investment. So they're just going to take the money that Oracle gave them, and they're going to make that investment in OpenAI, which is ChatGPT. And then ChatGPT is going to take that $40 billion and run their servers on Oracle servers, effectively giving the $40 billion back to Oracle as a commission for use of their services. I know it's confusing, but I hope you can see that this is literally just a circular funnel of $40 billion that was raised by outsiders. But in the process of this happening, by NVIDIA getting an investment of $40 billion, their stock price skyrocketed, and then the total market cap of NVIDIA increased by more than $40 billion. And then OpenAI doesn't even have profit. OpenAI doesn't even produce income. It's currently run, there's currently no profit. Like, they charge people. They charge people for like OpenAI premium, right? But that the revenues they gain from that doesn't exceed the expenses of the company. So they're in the red. They're not producing profit, okay? But rather than taking that $40 billion and showing a profit, they're giving it right back to Oracle, the people who created that money by borrowing from other people, so Oracle can run ChatGPT on their servers. It is a circular flow of money, but in the process, all parties increase their valuations in the stock market. It's literally a bubble. That's what it is. It's corporate engineering. It's financial engineering. And this just happened. And but here's the thing, that's not even the worst news I saw. The worst news I saw, and what makes me so sad, is to see the corruption, the corrosion from the inside of the Republican Party. You see, the Republican Party used to stand for capitalism. Do you remember that? Do you remember when that happened? In fact, they still go on TV and claim to be the bastions of capitalism. It's the Democrats that are socialist, right? That's what they always say, that the Democrats are the socialists. Trump comes out and announces that the U.S. government, this already happened, the U.S. government now has a 10% equity ownership in Intel, the computer chip company. So the U.S. government now owns 10% of Intel. That is the literal definition of socialism. It is when the government seizes the means of production. That's what socialism is. So the US government now owns 10% of Intel's stock. So they have a 10% equity position in Intel. And they get seats on the board of the company. So now the executive branch of the United States can appoint people to the board of a private company. So they're not even a private company anymore. I mean, at this point, what do we even call them besides a socialist enterprise? I don't even think at this point, we're following the direct definition of socialism. We could say it's a state-private partnership because the government doesn't have 100% ownership. But, this is anti-American. The Republicans are supposed to be the ones that understand economics. But this is economics 101 of a bad thing to do. It's just, and Intel didn't want to do this. If you actually listen to what they're saying in public, it's very clear that the Trump administration coerced Intel into letting this happen. That's very clear. The way, and let's give the full background. The $40 billion was originally grant money that was going to be given to Intel to build fabrication plant facilities in the United States. And that ball got rolling with the CHIPS Act under Biden. But Trump comes in and says, why should we be giving Intel something for nothing? Why should we be giving them $40 billion for nothing in return? And on that, he's right. No, I actually think he's kind of right. If we're going to subsidize them, they should sell their products to American citizens at a cheaper price, up to the amount of losses that we gave them in subsidy, right? But the approach that Trump took was, let's just own part of the company. No, that's worse. You're going in the wrong direction, Don. You got to go in the other direction. It's better for you to give no subsidy than to take a direct equity position in the company. This is a serious problem. This is not good at all. And what's also becoming a problem is that it worked with Intel, and now they're doing it with other companies. They're now about to do it with the largest lithium mine in the United States. So this is, once again, socializing the means of production. If we're gonna socialize the means of production, let's just be honest about what we are. Let's not go on TV and say that we're capitalists when we are more socialist than the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party has never advocated for government ownership in private institutions. I cannot think of a single time in my lifetime when that's even been advertised. Yet done. What I'm saying to you about Intel is already happened. It's not even an advertisement. It's done. It's a done deal. It's already done. That is absolutely wild. And it's the sign of a weak economy. Your economy is weak when you require government intervention to prop up your private industries. And then, of course, Intel, their stock soars because if the government owns stock in Intel, we know that two things are true. Number one, the government isn't going to let Intel go out of business. Why would the government let them go out of business? They own part of them. The government will print money if it has to, and then give that printed money to Intel if they have to. They now have ownership of it. And number two, Intel's competition. By choosing a favorite, you're now crowding out competition. Other chip makers like AMD, for example, they're like, wait, where's my... No, because that's the problem. It's called a race to the bottom in economics. In a perfect situation, the government would own 0% of private companies. But if I have a company and John has a company, and the government then buys 10% of John's company, well, now I really want the government to buy some of my company. If the government owns part of John's company, but they own none of mine, well, when a recession comes, who are they going to protect? Who are they going to pass laws to favor? Which company are they going to give more H-1B visas to? All of this shit, it's all connected. When the government picks and chooses favorites, it destroys capitalism. And then what is even more tragic is my friends, who I consider honest and intelligent, are like, this is a great thing. This is awesome. Wait a minute. You guys are supposed to be the conservatives. You're supposed to be the ones that can do economics and understand math. And it breaks my heart. And I try to explain it to you guys, and it's just like, it's like a lost cause. I mean, yeah, if you're listening, you know who you are. I mean, we had a long conversation. It's just tragic. I mean, the government should not be picking favorites in these kinds of things. And then it's like, oh well, there's a national security interest. Okay, well look, we have strict regulations against defense companies like Lockheed Martin and Raytheon, but we don't own their equity. There's a difference between regulating for sake of national interest or placing tariffs to protect industry for national security, but owning the equity in the company is a whole nother level. It's a step. It's another step toward the inevitable creep that is socialism taking over the country. In the last few episodes, I've been telling you guys about the jobs numbers, and obviously we have some more. So here's the jobs data. You guys already know what's going to happen. It's not good. In August, so if you guys remember, let's just give a quick review. In the months of June and July, we had massive, remember we had like 85% markdowns? We talked about that in the last episode. Well, in August, only 22,000 new jobs were created. Remember, in July, it was like 19,000, right? I don't have the number in front of me, but it was approximately that number. So August was only 22,000 new jobs. So that's very low, very low. The expectation was 75,000. So once again, coming in at what? That's a third approximately? No, less than a third. There you go. So another huge miss. That's like a 70%, whatever, you get the point. We're still under a third of what was expected. That's 3 months in a row. If we're not in a recession, tell me what one is at that point, right? Also, in the month of August, 85,000 layoffs occurred. So 22,000 jobs were made, but 85,000 layoffs occurred. So more layoffs than hires. That's pretty easy math. This was the worst August. August of 2025 was the worst August since August of 2009. And remember, the bubble popped. Like, this is the housing crisis. So that is, like, guys, there are so many stats that are matching or beating the records of the housing crisis that at this point is undeniable. The unemployment rate is now 4.3%, which is the highest since October of 2021. That was COVID. And, yes. On the last episode, I called it. I'm proud of myself. I called it. On the last episode, I said, watch, those June and July numbers, they're going to revise them down again. Do you remember I said that? Mm-hmm. They revised June down again. They dropped June from 27,000. Remember, the initial number was like 95,000. Mm-hmm. They dropped it to 27. Now they dropped June to negative 13,000. Wow. There you go. It was negative. I was calling. And I'm not the only one. A lot of people were saying that. Of the 22,000 new jobs in August, which they'll probably revise that down too, we lost in the month of August alone, the United States economy lost 12,000 manufacturing jobs. These are the very jobs that Trump campaigned on creating. Mm-hmm. What is going on? And it's like, okay, he hasn't even been president for a year yet, so we have to give him more time. But homeboy is doing so much damage in the first year that it might be impossible for him to recover in the next 3. You see what I'm trying to say? It's like, we lost 6,000 jobs or whatever. Like, if the losses were less extreme, then it could be argued that later in his term, they would be recovered. Or maybe it takes time. Maybe those would be recovered in the next administration. But he is dealing significant damage. In the month of August, almost 100,000, well, it's 85,000 full-time jobs were lost. I said that number earlier, but like, let that sink in. That's crazy. 86,000 full-time employees in the United States lost their job in August. One of those people was my former boss. Wow. Yeah. Isn't that crazy? Wow. He was a bad employee, so it's okay. Mm. But still, like, for an actuary to get fired, it's hard to do. It's like almost as hard as firing like a unionized employee. Not that hard, but like you're getting there, you know? So crazy. Of the 22,000 net jobs that were created in August, all 22,000 of them were part-time jobs. All 22,000. Now, I mentioned earlier that the unemployment rate is now 4.3%. That's according to the government. That's called the U3 unemployment rate. The U3 unemployment rate means that if you have a part-time job, but you're working under 40 hours a week, the government still considers you employed. Like if you're working 20 hours a week, the government says, oh, he has a job. Okay? You have a part-time job. Now, if you have a part-time job and you're working under 40 hours a week, the U6, U as in umbrella, the U6 unemployment rate will say that person is unemployed. So if you're working 20 hours a week, U3, you have a job. U6, you don't. There are different ways to measure unemployment, okay? The U6 unemployment rate is a more accurate measure of unemployment because part-time workers, when an economy is bad, a company would rather reduce the hours of all their employees than fire someone because the company doesn't want to fire you because they feel bad. They want you to make money. So if everybody's working 45 hours a week, whatever, but times get tough, rather than firing someone, they might just cut everybody down to 35. You understand what I'm saying? Okay, because because in theory and in practice, companies are very hesitant to lay someone off. Okay, well, the reason I mention this is the U3 unemployment rate is 4.3%. So they're going on TV and that's what they're talking about. 4.3 is high. We're every month it's going up. Every month it's going up. The U6 unemployment rate, 8.1%. 8.1%. And even U6 is an underestimation of true unemployment. Even that's a true underestimate. Because if you have been without a job for 3 months or more, you don't even get included in U6. Okay? If you've been out of work for more than 3 months, you're considered a, quote, discouraged worker. That's the government definition. You're, quote, discouraged. And they no longer count you even in U6. So, but think about it. I just told you the last 3 months of data, we've had massive layoffs all summer. So a huge wave of people that got fired in May, April and May, they're no longer even considered in U6. So the true unemployment rate is upwards of 10% now. There's no denying. So that is the sign of a weak economy. 1 in 10 people don't have a job. GDP growth is 3%, but inflation is 3.1. So real GDP is 0 or arguably negative. We're basically on the cusp. It's a debate whether it's 0 or negative. So, either way, not a good situation. So we have massive unemployment, we have inflation, we have negative or 0 unemployment, and the only jobs being created in this economy are part-time jobs. That's what's going on. But despite all of this, the government refuses to admit that we're in a recession, and they're taking action to make sure that we keep the housing market alive. The government is doing whatever they can to keep the housing market from collapsing. And the reason they don't want the housing market to collapse is because if the housing market collapses, the entire economy will collapse for many reasons. The first reason is people are now underwater on their houses, but they might have private equity loans, or not private equity loans, excuse me. They might have home equity loans that are tied to the value of their house. So if let's say your house is worth $300,000, you take out a $100,000 home equity loan. Okay, well, assuming that your house is paid for in full, and which I believe it has to be in order to get a home equity line of credit, I believe that's true. If you sold that house today, you would get $300,000, but 100 of it plus interest would have to go back to the bank to pay for your home equity line of credit. Does that make sense? Well, what's going on there is, what if the value of your house drops to $250,000? Well, if it drops to $250,000, the person is saying, well, wait a second. If I sell my house for $250,000, 100 of it plus interest has to go to the bank. I only have $150,000 left over for myself, which I need to buy another house, because houses are use assets, which means that when you sell one, you always need one. Like once you get one, you always need one, assuming you're not going to revert to renting, right? Which very few people do. Very few people revert from home ownership to renting, unless they're forced to in a recession. So when home values go down, people default on their mortgages They say, well, fuck this. I'm just going to stop paying my mortgage, or fuck this, I'm just going to stop paying the loan. I'm just going to stop paying the bank for the equity line of credit. It goes either way. If you own the house in full, I'm going to stop paying my equity line. If you don't own the house, but the value of it, like let's say you get a mortgage, which I'm sure that in our audience, you're more likely to have a mortgage at this point in your life than you are to have a home equity line of credit. Now, if you have a mortgage and you have a $300,000 mortgage, but then the value of your house drops to $250,000, you now owe more debt on the house than the house is even worth. Mm-hmm. So what are you going to do? Well, if you're willing to tank your credit score, you're just going to default on the house and it's going to go into foreclosure. But the bank, not only does your bank need the money for your mortgage, but your mortgage is an asset. On the bank's balance sheet, your mortgage is an asset because they're receiving money from you. Well, if you default on your mortgage, that asset gets wiped off their balance sheet. But the bank has liabilities. And now if the liabilities of the bank exceed the assets of the bank goes under. And now you have a domino effect because banks loan money to other banks. All the banks in the United States loan money to each other. So now you have an entire financial crisis, which is what happened in 2008, and we're on the precipice of it again. The government has to sustain the housing market, but the housing market is already broken. And I just learned this. What could they do? They could do quantitative easing, which is money printing. So quantitative easing will lower long-term interest rates. They could do that, but they already pulled off that trick before, and it just makes the bubble larger. Quantitative easing defers the bubble. It defers the crash, but it doesn't prevent it. It just defers it, okay? And we know that's true because, once again, they've tried that before. Here's another thing they're doing now. This is more housing stuff. So we all know what a variable interest rate mortgage is, right? An adjustable rate mortgage, an ARM, they call it. Okay, these ARM, adjustable rate mortgages, are one of the things that kicked off the housing crisis in 2008 because they have what's called a teaser rate. Do you know how this works, producer? Mm-mm. So the way this works is, let's say you get a mortgage, you get a fixed interest rate, which is most people choose, but you could get an adjustable rate mortgage, which means that like every 6 months, sometimes every month, depending on your credit score, the interest rate that you pay on your mortgage literally changes every month. Some months it goes down, some months it goes up. So the rate of interest accrual changes. And therefore, your mortgage payment every month changes. You might owe $1,000 this month, you might owe $1,300 next month, okay? Well, back in 2008, they were doing what's called a teaser rate, which was for the first 2 years you got your mortgage on an adjustable rate, they would give you 0.25% interest rate. But once the teaser rate ended at the end of the 2 years, they would jack up your interest rate to like 6%, 6.5%, and your mortgage payment would basically double. So 1 month you're paying $1,000 a month, the next month you'd pay $2,000 a month. People can't afford it, they default on the house. Also, when people buy the house, they know that they can't afford it when the teaser rate ends. But they don't care. They just figure, you know what, at least to get a house to live in for free, the interest rate is so low on the house that it's cheaper to own the house for 2 years than to rent. And you know what? I'll just deal with it and I'll tank my credit score after the 2 years ends. Okay? We did a lot of regulations after 2008 to try to stop this. But now we've got this new thing. So here we go. This is a fascinating thing. I just learned about it. It is called an interest rate buy down. I'm telling you guys this term now because I have a feeling that these interest rate buy downs are going to be a huge component in the next housing crisis. Here's how it works. An interest rate buy down is when a developer like Pulte or Lennar, these big publicly traded house construction companies, they build houses, they buy land, they run plumbing through the neighborhood, they pave the roads, they build a neighborhood with 200 houses, like Lawson, for example, and then they sell them off. And the people buying those houses, they're the first people to ever live in that house. Okay, they're builders. They're construction. They're builders. That's what we call them. They're builders. Okay, Pulte and Lennar are two of the biggest builders in the United States. Okay, so here's what an interest rate buy down is. An interest rate buy down is when the homeowner, the buyer, pays a fee up front, and in return, the builder pays a portion of the interest on the mortgage for 1 to 3 years. Yes, you heard that right. The builder helps you pay some of the interest on your mortgage for 1 to 3 years in exchange for a fee up front when you close on the house. And the mathematics, this is like rough numbers, but it's generally true. For every 1% of the loan amount that you give to the builder, they will pay 0.25% of the interest on the loan. Let's do an example. Let's say the house is $100. Let's make it simple. If you give Pulte $2 and your interest rate on the mortgage is 6.5%, Pulte will pay 0.5%. They'll pay 0.25% for every 1% you give them up front. So they'll pay 0.5% of the interest on your mortgage for the next 3 years. And you, the homeowner, you'll pay 6%. So for the homeowner, it feels like they have a mortgage with a 6% interest rate, and the builder is covering the other 0.5. But it's literally just a different scheme of an adjustable rate mortgage. Because after the teaser rate ends 1 to 3 years later, Pulte wipes their hands clean, they walk away, and now your mortgage just went up because your interest rate went from 6 to 6.5. Well, what? So what's going to happen? It's like we don't understand the mistakes we made in the past. It's like no one has any concept of recency. Everyone just forgets what happened just in my lifetime a few years ago. And when did these become popular? When did interest rate buy downs become popular in the United States? They became popular in late 2022. Well, 3 years after that is now, late 2025. But if you look at the rate of offerings, that's when they became popular. But if you look at the rate of offerings on interest rate buy downs, they're actually still increasing. The percentage of homeowners getting an interest rate buy down is increasing month over month. So this is just making more and more people that inevitably can't pay their mortgages. And these builders can't even, well, okay, you're saying, well, why are the builders doing this? Why are the builders offering to pay some of the interest on behalf of the buyer? Well, the reason for that is because the buyers themselves can't afford the houses. The builders have to do this because if they don't, there will be no one to buy the houses. And here's the funny thing, even with them doing this, houses are still sitting empty. You can actually go to Lennar. They have a website, the company website, Lennar Listings. Okay? And you can search up a zip code and you can see if there are any houses or neighborhoods or recently built lots that Lennar has built. And you'll see on there, price drop $60,000 9 days ago.
Wow.
All of these houses are getting marked down. Well, when you mark down the selling price of these houses, that lowers what's called the comps, so when you're buying a house, comps are the prices of the homes sold in your area of equal size. So if my house is 2,000 square feet and I sell it for $100, well, when you go to sell your house and it's also 2,000 square feet, you're probably going to list it for $100 because I'm a comp. I'm a comparable. So the comparable price is $100. If you listed your house for $130 and I'm a buyer, I'm going to say, well, I could buy Nick's house for $100, which is the same size as the producer's for $130. There's the comp, okay? So the housing market is all about comps. But when Lennar is lowering the listing prices of all these new houses that they're building, they're lowering the comps in their area. But when you lower the comps in your area, the existing homeowners in that area are probably underwater on their mortgage. Because that goes back to what I said earlier, remember? How when they sell the house for a lower price than they owe on the house. It's all connected. And that is why housing prices can't fall. And when I say can't, I mean if they do, we're going to have a major economic collapse. But the housing market is already breaking. The number of sellers far exceeds the number of buyers already. Because people can't afford the houses. And the Federal Reserve just lowered interest rates a few weeks ago. They lowered the short-term federal funds rate. And if you've been listening to this podcast for a while, you know what the Fed funds rate is. They lowered the Fed funds rate from 4.25 to 4%. Well, when they lowered the Fed funds rate to 4%, 10-year interest rates went up. So they lowered short-term rates, but in the long-term yield curve went up. So mortgage rates actually rose. They didn't go down. And that's because the government no longer has control over the yield curve. And the reason they no longer have control over the yield curve is because inflation is so high right now. Why would someone get a 10-year bond at 3% when inflation this year alone is already at 3.1? Why would someone get a 10-year bond at 3%? It doesn't make any sense. The economics aren't there. It's such a shame. In July, this is some July data that I have down here. I wrote this. I took some notes for this segment. I like to give you guys the real data. In July, the Producer Price Index, which is the prices that producers pay. You see, the CPI, the Consumer Price Index, is the prices we pay. The Producer Price Index is what companies pay, and then the companies sell those things to us. So the PPI is a leading indicator. If the PPI goes up and producers are paying higher prices, it's only a matter of time until they raise their prices and pass that on to the consumer, which will show up in the CPI. Okay. In July, the PPP expected rate, it was expected to be 0.2%. It was actually 0.9, which means that in the month of July, the prices that producers pay went up by basically a whole percentage in 1 month. Annualized, that is 12% inflation if you do 1% per month. But the CPI stayed constant, and that's the fascinating thing. Producer prices went up 0.9, but the CPI in July stayed constant at 2.7. And I mentioned this in the last episode. Companies are suffering from higher prices, but rather than passing them on to consumers, they're favoring layoffs. You guys remember me mentioning that in the last episode. This is further evidence of that. Year-over-year PPI is now 3.3%. So in the last year, producer prices are up 3.3%. But keep in mind, 0.9 of that is just the month of July. So we have an increasing rate of inflation. The core PPI, which means that you exclude food and energy, that's up 3.7% if you exclude food and energy. It was 2.6 in June. So in just 1 month, from June to July, core PPI went up 1.1%. Insane. So what that means is that if you're a producer and the thing that you're producing is not food and it's not energy, on average in the month of July, your prices went up 1.1%. If you do have food and energy, on average, you would expect your price to go up 0.9%. But either way, both of those numbers are so high. It's the sign of a weak economy. And the reason the government publishes core and standard is because energy markets can be pretty volatile. Oil prices can go up, they can go down. So the government likes to separate them. But when both numbers are high, that means that the underlying issue in the economy is not energy prices. And we know it's not, because gas is still, what, $3 a gallon approximately? It's been that way for a very, very long time at this point. The problem with the economy isn't gas prices. It's the inflation. It's the inflation and the money printing and the layoffs induced by the tariffs. There's so much, it's just poor economic policy. Also, the debt just hit 37 trillion. So at this rate, the national debt is now 37 trillion. In 2025, in the fiscal year, so the government does fiscal years from September to September. So we're recording this on, what is it, September 28th right now? Mm-hmm. On September 28th, so in 3 days, in 2 days, on September 30th will be the last day of the 2025 fiscal year, according to the government. October 1st will be the first day of fiscal year 2026, according to the government. The government does their fiscal year September to September. My company, I think we do it like March to March, I think. It's whatever. Why do I mention this? In fiscal year 2025, which ends in a few days, The government spent deficit spending $1.2 trillion. It's not the highest ever recorded. COVID was the highest ever recorded. But still, guys, that's a lot of money. $1.2 trillion deficit for fiscal year 2025? Marron. They're now saying that the deficit will hit $2 trillion a year within the next 3 years. It's $1.2 trillion this year, and they're saying that within the next 3 years, it's going to double. It's going to double. Well, Nick, when I was a kid and I was watching TV, the politicians would tell me that the national debt doesn't matter. Well, how is that going? How is that going now? The higher the national debt gets, the lower interest rates have to be. Because high interest rates on a high national debt means that the government has to pay a lot of money in interest expense on the debt. Because the government debt of $37 trillion commands interest payments on that debt. We've got a principal of $37 trillion, and we have an interest expense. Okay, well, what was the interest expense? The gross, not net, but gross. And I say gross and not net because I'll explain the difference in a moment. But the interest payment. So how much money did the government pay on interest in fiscal year 2025, which ends in a few days? The answer, interest expense, $1.1 trillion. The government collects approximately $4.7 trillion a year in taxes. And the official number is that for fiscal year 2025, 22% of all tax revenue went to servicing the interest on the debt. That number is going to only become more extreme. They are now saying that within the next 3 years, interest expense on the debt is expected to be $1.5 trillion a year in the next 3 years. So before the end of Trump's term, the interest expense on the debt is expected to be $1.5 trillion a year. So the government either has to raise tax revenue, which they're doing through tariffs, but it's not going to be that much money. And also, the tariffs are going to induce a recession. And when you have a recession, you have layoffs, which gives you less tax revenue, which is why tariffs are a terrible economic policy. And we've already discussed that in the past. But as the national debt is so large that we are choking under the weight of the national debt. You're saying, well, Nick, this has always been the case. We've always had a large national debt. Nick, for my whole life, we've had a large national debt, and we've always paid a lot of interest. That's actually not true. In 2020, just 5 years ago, the interest expense on the debt was only $650 billion. Now, that's a lot of money. That's a lot of money. Let's be clear, it's a lot of money. But the amount has doubled in 5 years. We've gone from $650 billion to $1.1 trillion in 5 years. We've basically doubled in 5 years. But has the debt doubled in the last 5 years? No, it has not. The debt has not doubled in the last 5 years. But if the debt hasn't doubled, but the interest expense has, how can that be? It's because interest rates, the inflation and the interest rates, when the government lends money on a long-term debt, the free market is now demanding higher interest rates. You see, interest rates used to be like 1% on bonds. They were like 1% for like 20 years. From 2008 to essentially 2021. I might be wrong by a few years in either direction. But from basically 2008 to 2021, and it might have even been earlier than 2008. In my mind, it might actually go back to 1999, if I'm thinking about it, with the dot-com crash. My point is, the government was loaning out money at 2% for 10 years. Well, now they've got to loan out at 4.5%, 5%. So with that higher interest rate, the debt doesn't have to double the interest expense. Does that make sense, producer? Exactly. So as the debt becomes unsustainable, the market is waking up. The market is waking up to the national debt. And the market is now accepting, wait a second, the Federal Reserve, we're not going to have 2% inflation over the next decade. We're going to have 4% inflation over the next decade if we're lucky. People are now realizing, big money, Wall Street, the rest of the world, now realizes that our interest rates and our inflation, is going to be much higher than 2% for the foreseeable future. And the tariffs made it worse, but I want to be clear that the tariffs are only part of the problem. The underlying issue is the national debt and government spending, of which both parties are responsible. Okay, well, how does a market respond? How does the world respond when the reserve currency of that world is undergoing I'm not going to use the word hyperinflation, high inflation? How does the world respond to when the reserve currency is undergoing a period of high inflation? And it's not a temporary period, but pretty much everyone accepts that it's going to be an extended period of high inflation. How does the world respond? You already know the answer. Gold and silver go up in price. I've been talking about this since the first episode of the podcast. Gold hit 3,600 on news of the rate cut. So interest rates went from 4.25 down to 4, which I mentioned earlier, short-term interest rates, the federal funds rate. Gold went from 3,300 to 3,600 in like 2 days. But since then, gold is now 37.50. I'll check that right now. It is. It's 37.60, but we'll just say 37.50. So we're now even higher again. We're now at 37.50 an ounce. Guys, a year ago, just 1 year ago, gold was 2,600. It's now $3,700. If you look at the growth chart, it's insane. Oh, well, Nick, gold is in a bubble. No. Gold is undervalued. The world has finally woken up to the inflation. Now, I don't expect this growth pattern to continue for the next 10 years. That's not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is the world is de-dollarizing. It is now official that foreign central banks own more gold than bonds. It is now official. That number became true within the last month, that foreign central banks now own more gold than U.S. bonds. Do we expect this to be a trend that slows down? Or do we expect this to be a trend that accelerates? We expect it to accelerate. The momentum is moving toward gold and silver, and the dollar is collapsing. The dollar is down, I believe, 13% since the beginning of this year. We're not even done. We still have 3 more months to go. And the dollar is down 11, 12, 13%. Huge problem. The Federal Reserve now expects GDP to have a negative adjusted rate. So they came out and announced that, which I kind of touched on a minute ago. We're in a huge bubble economy. And I'll just talk about silver really quickly because we're doing gold and silver. Silver hit $42 on news of the rate cut. But since then, silver has jumped to $46 for an ounce of silver. We might hit 50 before the end of the year, which would be crazy. 1 year ago today, an ounce of silver was $32. Less, like 31.90, 31.80. We'll just round up and say 32. Now it's 46. So if we open up our calculators and do 46 minus 32, we get 14. 14 divided by 32. In the last year, silver is up 44%. In the last year, in the last 365 days. This is unprecedented. These are unprecedented times. Right now, the American people, are living through history. We are living through the end of the dollar. We're living through the end of the reserve currency. And what would be even more tragic is we might be living through the sovereign debt crisis. Do you know what the sovereign debt crisis is?
No.
I haven't discussed this on the podcast before because I consider myself a realist and not someone who's an extremist. But looking at the data, I now feel comfortable talking about this and posing it as a possibility. A sovereign debt crisis is when a country defaults on their national debt because the interest expense on their debt doesn't exceed tax revenue, but it takes up such a large percentage of revenue that the government can no longer sustain itself. Let's give an example. In fiscal year 2025, which ends in 3 days, 22% of federal revenue went toward interest. The other 78% went toward military, Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, and government pensions. That list of things I just said, those 6 things, took up 100% of government revenue in 2025. But wait, what about the Department of Education? What about the military? What about literally everything else the government does? All of that was financed by increasing the national debt. So we as the country are already at the point where 100% of discretionary spending is covered by an increase in the debt. Well, what happens when the interest expense isn't 22% of revenue? What happens when it's 40% of revenue? Well, when it's 40% of revenue, now do we finance Social Security with adding to the debt? How high can the debt go? How low can interest rates go? These are questions that have never been asked because we've never had such a tremendous national debt. And we've never had a situation where a global hegemonic power like the United States has had such influence. You see, the British pound collapsed and no longer became the reserve after World War I, or arguably World War II, but we'll say it's around that period. But you see, the thing is, even though the British pound was the global reserve, the British didn't have the demanding total control of the American economy to the extent that the global economy to the extent that the United States does. Our control over the world economy is truly unprecedented in world history. So we don't actually know the implications of what a sovereign debt crisis even looks like in the United States. But what we could say for certain is, no, what we could say with high probability is that the United States is going to have to raise the peg and might have to revert to a gold standard. And once again, this is a very hyperbolic idea that I've never talked about on the podcast before because I really did think it was realistic. But the new revelations with the economic data, I'm now just posing it as a thought scenario. It is now plausible. A sovereign debt crisis in the United States is now plausible enough to be worth discussing, is what I'm trying to say. Well, if we repeg the dollar to gold, currently I believe it's $48 an ounce. So if you pay your taxes with gold, the government will give you $48 for an ounce of gold, even though it's actually worth $3,750. The government, according to the government, it's only worth only $48 an ounce, okay? And the last time that number was increased was, I believe, 1973. That's what I believe. I'm close. If I'm wrong, I'm only wrong by 2 years in either direction. Well, what if they raise the peg? They're going to have to raise the peg. That's what I think they're going to have to do. They might even have to raise it to 10,000 an ounce. Honestly, like it's a significant probability. I would say at this point there's a 25% chance that the government raises the gold standard. Maybe not 10,000. Maybe they do 7. Maybe they do 8. But guys, in a year from now, if I'm still alive and kicking and we're making these episodes, I might come to in a year and gold might be 8,000 an ounce. I don't know. I mean, if you asked me a year ago when gold was, 2,000 in the 2000s, 2,600. If you asked me a year ago when gold was 2,600, if I thought today it would be 3,700, I'd say, no, that's insane. And I'm a person that understands inflation and understands how bad it is and understands how gold and silver work. And even me, as a person with that understanding, if you came to me a year ago and asked me, I would say, no, that's crazy. That's an insane rate of growth. I mean, what's even the growth rate on that? 3,750 minus 2,600 divided by 2,600. In the last 365 days, gold is up 44%. If you came to me and said, Nick, I have an investment idea. I can promise you a 44% return in 1 year. I would say, that's a scam. And I would walk away from you at the speed of light. 100%. That's what I would say. I would say that sounds like a cryptocurrency scam. That's what I would say. But now we sit here and it's up 44% in a year with no sign of stopping. I mean, we know that the market solidified at 3,000. We know that for a fact. The banks solidified. And then there was a second round of solidification and building of a base at 3,300. Because earlier this year, Gold sat at 3,300 from April all the way to August. From April to August, it sat and didn't move. And it was basically 3,300. That was the entire world. That was all the banks establishing a base. I'm pretty sure that's just the new base. I think 3,300 is the new minimum on gold. It'll probably never go that low again. And if it does, it might be for like 2 or 3 days, a month at most. Right. So we've established a base that is what, 30% growth in the last year? What kind of safe investment? What kind of reserve asset? That shouldn't happen. So what I'm saying is it's even worse than I could have imagined. It's even worse than I could have possibly imagined in my worst nightmares. I don't know what the government is going to do. You know, there's a Thomas Jefferson quote, and it's paper is poverty. It is only the ghost of money and not money itself. Gold and silver are real money. Thomas Jefferson was a smart guy. I'll tell you that, because he knew a thing or two. I mean, this is just becoming it's just becoming ridiculous. Speaking of gold, in Greek mythology, there's someone named King Midas. You heard of King Midas? Everything King Midas touches, he turns to gold. Trump is King Midas in reverse. Everything he touches fails. All of his ideas, all of his economic policies, they have the opposite of the intended consequence. They don't make us stronger, they make us weaker. And people are saying, oh, we'll give him a chance. He's destroying the economy so fast, guys, that there's not going to be a chance. What's happening right now is insane. Not to mention, he is co-opting the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve lowered interest rates not because they wanted to, but because Trump has threatened the Federal Reserve, which is unconstitutional and completely illegal. He has suspended one person named Cook. I forget her first name. There's a woman. She's a black woman on the Federal Reserve. Her last name is Cook. Trump has put her on, he's basically frozen her employment at the Fed because she put 2 residences as her primary residence. So she's committed mortgage fraud. And yes, that is a crime. But committing mortgage fraud does not mean that you're incapable of carrying out your duties. The whole idea of the Federal Reserve is that they're appointed to 14-year terms. Her name's Lisa Cook. Thank you, producer. The whole idea of the Federal Reserve is that they're appointed to, I believe, 14-year terms, but then the government, the executive branch, can't intervene and can't lay them off. So it's becoming a real issue. The median starting salary for a person with a bachelor's degree in the United States is $47,000. Now, 5 years ago, $47,000 was great money. But now, $47,000 5 years ago is like $62 today. So if you're getting hired at 47 today, inflation has eaten away at your wages, is what I'm trying to say. I mean, it's so disheartening because I'm not even in the government. I'm not in the government, obviously. I'm talking to you here on a podcast. But I'm just some kid, and you could put me in there and I would do a better job. And that's what's aggravating to me. That we've got all these people with all these fancy degrees, and these people don't understand the basic concepts of currency devaluation, inflation, tariffs, international trade. What is going on here? Why is gold up 44% in a year with no sign of stopping? If they lower interest rates again, the Federal Reserve projects that they're going to lower interest rates 2 more times in the next 6 months. So they're going to go from 4 to 3.75 to 3.5. Every time they lower interest rates, gold is going to go higher. Every single time. And that's a problem. It's just, they don't understand that they're devaluing the dollar. As gold gets higher and higher, the dollar will get weaker and weaker, which makes imports more and more expensive, which exacerbates the tariff issue. I want to mention one last thing on gold, and then I'm going to quickly discuss H-1B visas. So another thing about gold is for decades and decades and decades, dating back to the 80s, standard financial advice was that in a retirement portfolio, people would have what's called a 60-40 split. Have you heard of this, producer?
No.
A 60-40 split is when 60% of your retirement money goes into stocks. and bond. No, not bonds, stocks and other equities. And 40% of your retirement goes into bonds. And then we call that fixed income on the bonds, okay? 40% bonds, 60% stocks. And it would say, don't buy gold. Bonds have a better rate of return than gold. Bonds have a guaranteed rate of return because you have fixed interest rate. Like right now it's 4%, what we just talked about. Whereas gold doesn't have a fixed interest rate. You just kind of have to see what happens in the market. It has no yield. It doesn't generate any income. And that is a significant con to gold. So they were saying, don't buy gold. Look at historic performance. Bonds outperform gold. Here we go. Here comes Wall Street. It's official. Morgan Stanley, huge investment bank, huge, one of the biggest on earth, have officially changed the retirement portfolios of all of their customers from 60-40 stocks bonds to 60-20-20. 20% gold. It's official. It's already happened. We now have one of the largest investment banking firms in the world telling all of their customers, put 20% of your retirement in gold. They're just the first. As more and more people buy gold, realizing the inflation in the country, well, that's demand. And as demand goes up, what happens to price? Price goes up because supply is relatively constant. So already the big money is moving into gold. And if you actually look over the last, I think it was 15 or 20 years, I think it was 20 years. I don't have that number in front of me, but I think it was 20 years. Over the last 20 years, gold has actually outperformed the entire S&P 500. So that means, so all the people saying that stocks are even, so under that logic, it should just be 100% gold. Under that logic. So that's not what I'm actually implying, but if you were to use reductive logic, you could get to that point. I don't expect this to go on forever. That's not what I'm implying. What I'm implying is gold is going to, in my opinion, make big moves upward in the future. It may stall out for another few months. That's not the point. The point is the tariffs, the low interest rates, the inflation, and the sovereign debt crisis. If any of those things happen, I just listed off about 4 or 5 things there. If even one of those continues or gets worse, gold is going to go up in price. Only one of them has to get worse. But I think they're all going to get worse. That's what I think. Tariffs might go away when Trump leaves office, or maybe he'll make up his mind before he leaves because he changes his mind all the time. So I am very sad to see my country suffer from hyperinflation, because that's really what that is. That's really what that is. Because the price of gold reflects the price of other commodities, goods, and services. So the suppression of gold's price that went on for decades, the demand, the floodgates, the water is beating on the floodgates and they can't hold it back any longer. No matter what financial engineering they do, they can't stop the inflation. And it's tragic to see, and it sucks that I have to be alive when this happens. I'm very afraid of what's going to happen, and the implications are so crazy that I don't even know what it looks like. Once again, 44% movement in a year should never be happening with a reserve asset. That is speculation. When you hear about that, it's speculation. But it's not speculating. It's foreign governments and investment banks. Foreign governments, they don't speculate. They don't speculate. They know their shit. Anyways, let's talk about some H-1B visas for a moment. Trump has put a $100,000 fee on all new H-1B visa applications just to apply. If you apply, you might get rejected. Just to apply. It's $100,000 that companies have to pay on behalf of the applying employee. There are pros and cons to this. I'll start with the cons. The cons are that, in theory, the United States will no longer attract the best labor on earth. That's what the whole premise of the H-1B visa is. They would take in foreign laborers that are highly skilled. So in theory, we will no longer get the best labor on earth. That's a con. Number 2 is that companies might just simply offshore those jobs. Rather than hiring Americans domestically, or rather than hiring a foreigner and shipping them over here, we might just outsource those jobs. No one's talking about that one. The conservatives aren't talking about that one. They think that now companies are going to be forced to hire Americans. That's not necessarily true. The companies may just offshore the jobs. We have to see. But number three, offshored jobs generate no tax revenue. At least if you have, some Indian come over with an H-1B visa, yeah, he has the job and not an American, but at least that Indian is paying taxes. He's paying American income taxes. Well, not anymore. If we offshore the job, we don't even get tax revenue. And number four, should we be logically consistent and apply this concept to low-skilled labor? I have a lot of friends of mine that are in favor of, in favor of removing the H-1B visas, but they are against deporting illegal workers. Well, if we're going to be logically consistent, we should either be against both or in favor of both. Because the whole logic behind the H-1B visa and raising the fee is that American companies will have to hire Americans. That's the whole premise of the idea, right? Well, the whole premise behind deporting the illegal workers is that American companies will have to hire Americans to do those jobs. Both arguments have the same root cause. So if we're going to be logically consistent, we should be either in favor of both, as in favor of getting rid of H-1B visas, and in favor of deporting illegal workers, in favor of both, or we should have the stance of more H-1B visas and more illegal workers, or just keep the ones that we already have. Because the underlying economics is the same, it's just different ends of the income spectrum. That's all it is. That's all we're talking about. So we should be at least logically consistent. That could be kind of reductive. There's obviously more implications involved. One of which is that illegal workers are just actually committing a crime by coming here illegally, and H-1B visa holders are not committing a crime. That is definitely an important distinction. But the economics of it, not the legal aspect, but the economics of it boil down to basically that dynamic. So that was our segment on economics. Those of you who stuck around, thanks for listening. I just really wanted to teach and educate in that segment. We're going to cut to our last commercial break and wrap up with a quick segment on current events. Do you want to make your mark on the four corners of the world? To leave behind a piece of yourself, as if to say, I was here before you? Then consider customizing and ordering your first stack of travel cards today. Travel cards are small business cards with some personal info about yourself that never contain enough for anyone to actually contact you. They are perfect for an insincere goodbye. You can hand these out and pepper them across town. So join us, Globetrotter, and for the low price of $20, you too can become a street vendor's source of anonymous authority to lure in other tourists. Back from the ad break with our last and quick segment on current events. Although a lot has happened, I think that most of it you guys would understand my opinions on, but there are some key significant things that I want to bring up. The first is that Israel has finally come out, and I'm really proud of them for their honesty. They have announced that they will be doing a complete takeover of Gaza. So I'm really proud of them for being honest. Obviously, it's deplorable action, but at least now everybody knows what we all kind of knew from the beginning. We talked last episode about mission creep and moving the goalpost, and you see, you might say, well, Nick, this has to be the final goalpost. Obviously, the final goalpost is the complete annexation and takeover of Gaza. No, there's more. In fact, next they're going to do the West Bank, and then who knows, maybe they'll even creep into Syria, The Holy Land is bigger than you guys think, so, maybe go online and look up a map and look at what the Jews consider to be their true Holy Land. You'll be kind of surprised. Lots of countries are going to be a little upset if that comes to pass. They also denied bombing, so they've been Europe has been sending boats full of aid to Gaza and trying to dock them on the shore so people can get food. Totally normal thing. Well, Israel bombed one of those aid boats, and they came out and they publicly denied bombing the aid boat and said, no, that wasn't us with a missile. It was actually an asteroid that destroyed the aid boat. That is not satire. That's a real story. Just wanted to throw that out there and let you guys know what we're dealing with over here in the Middle East. But at least Israel has lost all international respect. Netanyahu was doing his speech at the UN a few days ago. It might have even been yesterday. And people just left. People just walked out of the room, which I was really happy to see. I don't know the exact count, but if I'm just going to ballpark it right now, it looks like at most, 30 countries stayed. And that even might be too many. So most countries left, which is great. Another little thing about the UN is, and this is a fun fact, 20 years ago. So you guys might remember a few episodes ago, I discussed how Syria had a civil war and how a new Islamic terrorist came to power. Producer, do you remember this?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Perfect. Well, what I always enjoy on this podcast is bringing up things that I've already talked about and telling you how the story unfolded. So, 20 years ago, the current president of Syria, this guy who just took over, was a member of Al-Qaeda. Okay? He was remember, Al-Qaeda, they did 9/11. He was being held as a prisoner. The current president of Syria was being held as a prisoner in a Syrian prison run by the United States under the command of General Petraeus. Okay? Last week at the UN in New York City, the president of Syria was on stage being interviewed by General Petraeus. What a life. One moment you're prisoner being tortured by General Petraeus. 20 years later, you're president of Syria and you're being interviewed by him. So strange. Very, very strange. So I thought that was funny and I wanted to tell you guys about that. Ghislaine Maxwell comes out and she cleared Trump's name. Who would have thought? Well, I called it, obviously. She says this. This was a quote from August 23rd. Quote, President Trump was oh, by the way, as I read this quote, I want you to imagine that someone's holding a gun to my head, because that's how it sounds. Here we go. President Trump was always very cordial and very kind to me. And I just want to say that I admire his extraordinary achievement in becoming president now. And I like him. And I have always liked him. So that is the sum and substance of my entire relationship with him. That's end quote. Guys, come on, like, who believes this? Who believes this? How does anybody fall for this? I don't think anyone is. At this point, I don't think anyone actually falls for it. I do think Trump listens to the podcast, though, because in the first episode, I talked about how we should rename the Department of Defense to the Department of War. I made a comment about that, and I talked about its history and how it used to be called the Department of War. But I do think he listens because he's officially changed the name back. It is now called the Department of War. So Trump, thank you for listening in. Maybe you could listen to some other more of the substantive advice I provide. But this is a great start, and I'm always happy to have another listener. Trump is getting a little worried recently. He's been making some comments when talking out of nowhere and unprompted, he discussed how he doesn't think he's going to make it to heaven. Quote, I'm at the bottom of the totem pole. So he's having some thoughts, some internal dialogue. He's obviously coming to terms with all the sexual abuse, war crimes, and bribes that he's taken. And he's saying to himself, my goodness, I am not going to make it into heaven. And obviously, I'm in no place to judge. That's God's place. But I don't think there's the best argument. I'll just say that, you know? So bad news. I think he's right. I think he's right. But I do think Trump is going to die in office. It might be next month. It might be next year. It may be in 10 years. But I do think Trump is going to die in office. I mean, he's building this ballroom. You seen this, producer?
No.
This is comical. He's building a ballroom with like 50-foot high ceilings and gold plating inside, and it's attached to the White House. It's so gaudy, it looks disgusting. Construction is slated to be basically finished when there's 1 year left in his presidency. Why would you build a huge ballroom like that to then only be able to use it for a year, or probably less, because government contracts always get slowed down? That's the kind of stuff that makes me think he wants to hang around. You know, those little things that he does. And Trump really does care about that ballroom. It's always on his mind. The day after Charlie Kirk's death, when asked how Trump was doing, Trump responded by talking about how great the ballroom is going to be. So we really do understand how much it's on his mind and how much thought he's putting into it. I'm sure he's doing all the interior decorating himself. And we should talk about Charlie Kirk really quickly. Charlie Kirk was assassinated. And I know a lot of you guys are probably surprised that I haven't dedicated more of the episode to this, but I think that's because I don't think I'm the best voice to talk about it. I'll be honest, and a lot of you guys that are listening already know this. I think Charlie Kirk was an idiot. Now, I don't think he should have been assassinated, and I do think he was a voice for the youth. As a voice for the youth, and as a representative for God, I think he was one of a kind and a very powerful force in the country. I think he had a positive influence in turning a lot of people towards Jesus and toward Christianity. I also think he was a voice for the youth in terms of the woes of college, whether that be the price of it, how for many it's a waste of time, the unaffordability of homes, and how difficult it is to raise a family. He was the only voice for the youth. I think he was the only genuine voice for the youth. I think Democrats pretend to be voices for the youth, but their solutions never actually work. They just propose more national debt, which leads to more inflation. I think Charlie was a very powerful spiritual leader, and I think that in his heart he was a good person. I can say all of that while still believing that he was an idiot. And those two things can both be true at the same time. What's sad about Charlie being assassinated, beyond Charlie as an individual, is that we have very clearly entered a new age of American violence. You know, it used to be, I would argue that the last age of, and some people could disagree, but I would argue that the last age of political violence was when both Kennedys and Martin Luther King were assassinated. I would argue that time, the civil rights era, the 60s, I would argue that was the last major period of political violence. But now we have Trump being shot at. Remember they hit his ear. We had another guy sneaking onto a golf course to kill Trump. That guy just got sentenced to jail, by the way. We have Charlie being assassinated, which I actually think Charlie being assassinated is going to be more consequential to American history than if Trump were assassinated. Because Charlie's assassination scarred the youth, especially young conservative men. It scarred the youth in that sense. And I think it radicalized a lot of people. And I think a lot of people are going to turn to Nick Fuentes, which is, I don't want to put too much time on him because we're running up against the clock here, but, he's obviously a more negative influence on the youth than Charlie was. I think Charlie was a net good influence, to be honest, but he definitely had some negative aspects, specifically the arguments he would make that were related to policy. But, look at the country. When a conservative dies, there's no protests, just prayer. That should be noted, right? When a liberal dies, who really wasn't even politically significant, we burn cities. We hurt people, we loot, we riot, And I think it's fair. I think it's uncontroversial to say that, conservatives react to political transgressions against them in a more adult, respectful manner. I don't think there's anything controversial about that statement. So, that happened in the country, and they had this, I guess we're going to call it a memorial. I think they were calling it a funeral, but it wasn't a funeral. It felt like a political rally. Okay, so I've said what I've said about Charlie Kirk, but we're having a lot of political violence. We had 2 Minnesota lawmakers killed by a far right-wing extremist a few months ago. President Trump didn't even call Tim Walz or any of the families to apologize. Why do I bring that up? I bring it up because it shows the double standard, right? That happened first, and we didn't have a massive TV parade Super Bowl halftime show for them. It was very inappropriate. And I do want to say that I do think Charlie Kirk's memorial was in poor taste. I do believe that. His wife was wearing white, strange. Pyrotechnics, strange. None of his actual siblings or parents or friends speaking at the event, strange. The entire Republican cabinet speaking instead, strange. Announcing a cure to autism at the memorial, which apparently is just acetaminophen or Tylenol, strange. By the way, the science on that might be true, but I'm saying this is not the place to make such an announcement. Like, that's what I'm trying to say. I'm a man of the science. We have to wait for the science to come out. I'm not going to make an opinion on this right now. I've got to wait for more data. But like, so many, having a booth to sell merchandise, strange. Like, literally every part of Charlie Kirk's memorial felt extremely strange and kind of gross. I felt like I was watching an episode of The Boys. It was like kind of like grotesque. But I guess Charlie will be remembered in death as he was in life, which is a living and breathing arm of the Republican National Committee, because that's what they turned his memorial into. So maybe in death he would be okay with that, but that is the current events. I am sad about Charlie. I hope the country recovers from it, and I hope that we continue to move in a positive direction rather than continuing to move in a negative one. I'm excited to talk to you guys soon. I anticipate being back late in October. That's my anticipation, or perhaps early November. But I've given you guys a lot of content to chew on in the meantime. So have a nice day, and as always, thank you for watching. Bye-bye now.